Assalamu alaikum. Uh, Assalamu alaikum, bro. How are you?
Alaikum salam. Good. Alhamdulillah. How are you?
Oh, you freaked me out actually just now. Yeah. So what happened?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, yeah, I hear you.
There's no echo?
No, everything's good.
Okay. Yeah, how's it going?
Yeah, Alhamdulillah. How are you?
Good. Alhamdulillah. Are we live now?
Yeah, yeah, we're live. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. Welcome to Islamic Calling Podcast. So as you guys can see, we have a special guest, our favorite Pokemon, brother Daniel Haqiqatjou. So assalamu alaikum, brother. How are you doing?
Walaikum salam. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm well, alhamdulillah. How's your family? How's everything?
Alhamdulillah, good. Everyone is good. Getting used to some cooler weather, so the kids have some sniffles. But
Okay. How many kids do you have, brother?
4.
Okay, it's mashallah. So, as I was saying, you kind of freaked me out before. So, what happened? Like, did I say something wrong in the stream?
Oh, fit you out? What does that mean? I've never heard that expression.
No, I mean, like, you told me that, to did cut out some parts of the stream.
Yeah. We can get. You want to get right into it? We can get right into it. So you were making some very serious accusations. You even mentioned OBL and saying that my arguments. I mean, first of all, the paper is Muslim skeptic, so
Okay.
it wasn't just my writing; it's the writing and research of a lot of different scholars, researchers, writers. So I just want to clarify. I might say we, I might say I when we're talking about that report and yaqeen.
Okay. Okay.
But you're mentioning specifically that I'm defending the killing of civilians.
I'm not sure I said that.
You said I was watering down. I mean, I can read the exact quote. I think I wrote
Yeah,
it down.
but watering down doesn't mean you're defending killing civilians.
Okay, if you don't think that means that
Okay,
defending,
I'll take that part
I mean,
out.
is
It,
that
it comes come across
it's
the.
extremely big claim to make. It's a very serious and sensitive
Okay,
claim.
okay, I do apologize. I do apologize.
Okay, yeah, but we want to talk about it because you also completely misunderstood the
Okay,
argument.
okay, okay. Now please explain.
Yeah, so let me ask you a question. You were talking about Justin Parrott's Yaqeen article about jihad. So, do you think that Justin Parrott in this article is defending or agrees with the concept of jihad at talab?
Mm, I mean, he explains a concept of jihad where he's saying that there are concepts in jihad that is similar to international laws. At least
That's
that's
not my
how much.
question. My question is, does Justin Parrott accept or acknowledge the validity of jihad at talab?
He doesn't mention it.
Yes, he does. He does mention offensive jihad. He says that this is the ideology of extremists and ISIS or terrorist groups.
Can you tell me why he said that? You can share the screen if you like.
So the other thing about Yaqeen's papers are that they are constantly changing them and updating them without
Okay.
noting exactly what they've changed. So you have to download the original articles because you can't tell what they've gone back and changed.
By the way, you have a very good camera, by the way.
Yeah, it's some people like it, some people don't. It's called Logitech Brio.
Oh, I'm just using my phone, Android. Sucks. I look like a ghost.
No, you look good, mashallah.
Thank you. By the way, do you have any plans for your next debate?
Oh, there might be a announcement soon about that, inshallah. All right, here it is.
Okay.
So this is their current paper. So I want to see how can I don't want to share my Gmail. So let me see. How should I? I've never shared on. I don't know what is going to share on this. With StreamYard, I haven't shared stuff before.
If you want, I can pull it up.
Hold on, no, I have it. Hold on.
Okay.
All right, so here, if you can see, it says,
Can you make it a little bigger?
yeah. The view in Islam in some parts of West, however, fail to make this important connection between traditional Islam and modern developments, building upon centuries of bias. Some Orientalist scholars in the West portrayed Islam as an inherently expansionist and aggressive ideological religion that rejects the principle of jus ad bellum and religious freedom. This misperception is exacerbated by jihadist extremists who repeat the exact same scriptural and legal arguments as anti-Muslim Orientalists. The result is that common Muslims living in Western societies are not only considered foreign, but even dangerous members of a subversive global political movement. These negative stereotypes have led to real-world acts of violence against Muslims, hate crimes, blah, blah, blah. So that's one place that he mentions extremism. But let me just dissect that quote. Let me go back. So the question is Islam expansionist? That's what jihad al-talab is. Like, for those who don't know what jihad al-talab is, it can be translated as offensive jihad. It can be translated as expansionism. This is the question. Because jihad, this is what the Orientalists say. And Orientalists claim that Islam is quote unquote spread by the sword. It's expansionist. Muslims were aggressive historically. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was aggressive. The Khulafa were aggressive. They attacked nations and groups that didn't attack them. So that's what offensive means. So the question is, does Yaqeen and Justin Parrott acknowledge that reality? Or do they deny it and say this is jihadist extremism and Orientalism? And that's exactly what Justin Parrott is saying. He's saying that jihad al-talab is jihadist extremism. And it's the misperception of legal arguments. This has nothing to do, by the way, with killing civilians. Do you understand this?
Yeah, but to play the devil's advocate a little bit.
No. First, let's talk about, before you get to devil's advocate, like, I want to understand, because in your video, like, that was my whole problem with your video. I don't have a problem, like, with criticism of me, with the article, whatever. I in fact, have gotten a lot of constructive feedback over the years, but it has to be accurate. And what was disturbing about that, what you said, is that you're making it like I or a Muslim skeptic is advocating for or defending the idea of killing civilians.
I've never said
watering down, or that's completely
when
wrong.
I say watering down, I don't mean like you're advocating for what they're advocating for. What I mean when I say watering down is that you don't mention it enough, if that makes sense. Like it is a very
no one. So that's not a part of the disagreement. That's not part of the critique. The critique of Yaqeen's paper is not, oh, they're saying don't kill civilians, but you should, it's more nuanced than that. Nowhere in the paper, in this paper or in our response, is it on the issue of killing civilians. Because on that issue, Muslim Skeptic and Yaqeen and me and Justin Parrott were all on the same page. Civilians, non-combatants should not be killed. And that's actually the majority position within Islamic law. So nowhere are we disagreeing with that. The problem with Justin's paper is that he's bringing quotes about not killing non-combatants, and he's saying that this means Islam is not expansionist. He's conflating the two issues. He's conflating the issue of killing civilians. So you'll find many statements from the legal scholars, and he quotes them. He quotes Ibn Taymiyyah, he quotes Ibn al-Qayyim. There are many statements about not killing non-combatants. You should not kill in war. Do not kill civilians, do not kill women, do not kill children, do not kill monks. This is a clear-cut established principle that the vast majority of scholars agree with. There is a minority disagreement, but the majority agree. So Justin Parrott is quoting all of those scholars about that, and he's saying this means that that jihad is only about defense. Islam is only defensive.
Okay,
but this
now
is
can I
conflation, right?
okay.
So
now can I play the devil's advocate?
go ahead.
Okay, so you showed me the quote, but as far as I could see, he didn't say that, jihad cannot be expansionist.
He said it's jihadist extremism.
Yeah, extremism, but extremism could mean...
Put on the screen so people can see the quote while you're talking.
Okay. Can you make it a little bigger? I want to read something. Okay. The view of Islam in some parts of West, however, failed to... Okay. Building upon centuries of bias, some Orientalist scholars in the West portrayed Islam as an inherently expansionist and aggressive ideological religion that rejects the principles of just et bellum. By the way, can you explain what this means, just et bellum?
Like just war theory, or just cause for war, just cause for belligerence, aggression, or warfare.
Just et bellum and religious freedom. This misconception is excavated by jihadist extremists who repeat the exact same scripture and legal arguments or anti-Muslim Orientalists. Okay, so basically what he's saying is that the arguments that made by the extremist and the Orientalist is similar, right? But he's not really saying
the exact same. He doesn't say similar. He says the exact same.
Okay. So he says it's the exact same argument. But he's not saying the Islam. That doesn't mean that jihad talab is like it's not like he's not denying it, because you're claiming
he's
that
calling himself a jihad extremist. He's saying that I agree with the jihadist extremists and the Orientalists.
Yeah, but you said in your paper that he denies it, right?
He does deny it. This is denial of it.
But he's not denying it, though. He's just simply saying that the extremist and they are making the same argument. How's that denying?
So he's calling himself an extremist.
How does that mean he's calling himself an extremist?
He's saying this view of expansionism is what Orientalists and jihadist extremists advocate. So you don't think that's a denial of expansion?
Why? No. Well, jihadist extremist version of their argument is very different. Like, right?
No, he says it's the exact same.
No, I mean different than how the scholars say it is. Like, for example,
by misquoting scholars, he claims that Islamic scholars have only accepted jihad as defense, and the Quran and the Sunnah only advocate jihad as defense.
But he didn't say that, though. Like with all respect, bro, like his writing is very vague. The
Yeah, it's
passage you
okay.
quoted
Fine.
is very
No, no.
vague.
What I cited here for you is not vague. It's very clear. You're just giving a very bizarre interpretation, like, oh no, he's not denying
How is this bizarre?
expansionism.
No.
Here, give me
How
a
did what I say bizarre?
find other statements if that wasn't clear enough for you. I mean, it's getting kind of ridiculous and bizarre. I thought you were like a good faith. You're trying to understand these issues. If you want to just assume, like, give this crazy interpretation
No,
that
no, bro.
applies the explicit words
Please.
on the page that we're looking at. We're all looking at. Let's look in the comments about who thinks that Justin Parrott is not denying expansionism here.
He's saying that he's simply making the argument that Orientalist version of what jihad is, and the Khariji version of what jihad is the same. But that doesn't mean that jihad or talab doesn't exist. It doesn't follow. Do you understand?
What do you mean doesn't exist? He says it
Well,
exists in the view of extremists.
no, you
And
said he's denying it,
yeah,
bro.
he's
You said
denying it by
he's
saying
denying it.
he's denying it by saying this is the view of extremists. Just give me 1 second. So this is an addition that he made after our critique, because his original paper, as is mentioned here, was jihad as defense.
Okay.
The whole paper was about jihad is only defensive.
Okay.
Okay.
Wait. Can I read that?
Yeah. Go ahead.
The part you quoted. Okay. The original version of this. Sorry, can you make it bigger? I can see it. Okay. The original version of this.
Whenever I expand it, it becomes this view. Is this better?
Oh, it's fine. The original version of this paper, entitled "Jihad as Defense: Just War Theory in the Quran and Sunnah," has been revised, expanded, and updated based upon constructive feedback from trusted colleague and the author's continued research. By the way, he doesn't mention you. Uh,
Yeah. So the paper was published 2000. The original version was published in 2017, I believe.
yeah.
And then our critique for Muslim Skeptic came, and then 5 years, or not 5 years, but 3 years later, right after our critique, then it's magically updated because of constructive feedback. Where was the constructive feedback for the past 3 years?
Yeah, I think that's a little problematic. Okay, so what other part you wanted to show me?
So look at this. This is how he defines jihad.
Okay. Jihad in Islam, or warfare in defense of life and Muslim religious rights, is legally analogous to modern just war theory as enshrined in international law. Jihad itself is a much broader concept in Islam, including difficult acts of charity and spiritual struggles against Satan and lower self. In terms of warfare, jihad in the Quran and Sunnah foreshadows many features of the modern just war theory, theory concept of just ad bellum, as well as just value, justice in war, non-aggression, proper declaration of rights of intention, war as a last resort, proportion, retaliation, strict adherence to covenants, and protection of civilians' lives and property. Primary goal of jihad is to protect the safety of Muslim community and fulfill obligation of practice Islam and share it with the world. Share it with the world.
Yeah,
Bro,
share
he's
it
not.
by yaqeen articles and share Islam.
Yeah, but sharing with the world can mean expansion, right?
Look, he says it is not a tool of religious compulsion or forced conversion, nor is it a means of advancing purely political, ideological, or worldly goals. That's completely false.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I agree. That's problematic.
Yeah. So look, the final section offers a detailed analysis and rebuttal of common proof texts used to malign Islam as politically aggressive, violently expansionist, or a warmongering religion.
Okay.
So he's denying expansionism.
I
I
don't
don't know
think
how
he.
you can't agree to that. If you
Mhm.
can't agree to that, then it's like right there in front of you.
I agree that, that his writing is very, again, like I would like to say it.
No, it's very
He's
explicit.
watering down things, but I don't think he's denying like expansionism or
He's
jihad
denying
al-talab.
it right here. He's denying it. Rebuttal, rebuttal of violent expansionism. I know, like, how much clearer can it get?
Yeah, but violent expansionism again is a little ambiguous term, right? Because the violent expansionism that the Kharijis have is different to what I don't know, like the Salafat, right? They're not the same.
Kharijis, the point of Kharijis, Khawarij were attacking Muslims. They weren't going and expanding Islam. They were attacking the Khulafa. They were attacking the Emir. It wasn't expansionism.
Yeah, but I'm talking about modern Kharijis. Like groups like.
Modern Khawarij also attack Muslims. ISIS
So,
attacks mainly
so you're
Muslims.
saying they don't attack non-Muslims?
No, they don't. ISIS attacks Muslims. They attack
What are you talking
Muslim
about?
lands.
Of course they do. There have been multiple bombings. Like just a few days ago, they attacked like the Shia mosque, right?
Okay, brother, this is not going to be a productive discussion. We can just end it right here because you don't understand what Justin Parrott is arguing. When I show you the exact quotes, you have weird, bizarre interpretations of them. So, I
No,
mean,
no,
maybe it's my fault. Maybe I'm not explaining it properly, but I'm not here to, just sit
no,
and
no. Please,
listen to
I
our.
understand what you're saying. Like, I do agree that his writing is problematic, but I don't think he's denying like jihad al-talab.
Okay,
Like, I don't see
okay,
evidence for that.
yeah, you didn't see evidence. That means whatever. You can't understand what he's writing. That's fine. But go to, let's see what else he says. If there was a hostile nation that prevented people from accepting Islam, such as the Byzantine, Roman, or Sasanian Persian empires, an offensive jihad would be warranted in order to deliver God's message to them and allow their people to freely embrace the religion without fear.
Okay.
So this is also denied by very clear examples. Like how did Egypt become Muslim? Was Egypt denying people from becoming Muslim? No. Look at the Sirah. It's very clearly recorded that the Sahabi, Amr ibn al-As, went to Umar, who was the Khalifa at that time, radiallahu anhum, and he said, why don't we go and conquer Egypt? And Omar was hesitant. He was like, well, we don't want to spread our armies too thin. We don't want to, there's no strategic benefit right now for going and conquering Egypt. But Amr ibn al said, no, they have a lot of resources. They have a lot of resources, and it will really benefit us to conquer Egypt. So he's explicitly mentioning conquering for resources. Resources for the Ummah, resources to benefit the Muslim Ummah, the army. And he's
Okay.
saying this is something that we should do. So Omar finally agreed, and they went and opened Fath Misr. That was the expansion into Egypt. It was on the basis of, oh no, Muslims are being oppressed. Like these statements are explicit in the Sirah. Like there's no denying it. So how does Justin Parrott explain that? He can't. So the only thing he can do is cherry pick. So this is what our report details. How all of these quotes that he's taking from Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, are cherry picked because Ibn Taymiyyah talks about jihad al-talab explicitly. And all the scholars, like there's no difference of opinion on the permissibility if the emir chooses to do so in certain contexts. In other contexts, he must. It's wajib to expand Islam through conquering because and I have a whole video about this. So if anyone's confused about this idea of jihad al-talab, go to my YouTube channel, Muslim Skeptic, and there's a video on offensive jihad. Was Islam spread by the sword? And I explain logically and morally why this is a completely justified principle.
Okay,
And
we have a
well,
comment.
before the comment, let me say what I want to say. So Ibn Taymiyyah has this whole explanation of the difference between jihad dafa, like defensive jihad, and jihad al-talab. And both of them are part and parcel of Islam. And no scholar ever disagreed with that. That's a separate issue than, killing civilians.
Okay. I agree. It's a separate issue. Um, so, so now let's get back to the general topic of you writing the article. What was your main intention that led you to write the article, if I do ask?
So it was my intention and the intention of many others where we're seeing Yaqeen Institute put out these false claims about Islam, distorting Islamic teachings, misrepresenting the Islamic tradition, and basically promoting this watered down, liberalized Islam. And this has been causing a lot of confusion amongst youth. I mean, just look at this live stream. People are confused about these kinds of issues, and this is a big fitna. You're misguiding the community and teaching them a distorted version of Islam. So there's a need to do islah. Islah means to correct and to distinguish what's right and what's wrong, what's haq, what's batil, to have an accurate portrayal of what Islam actually is. If you are
Yeah,
misrepresenting the Quran, you're misrepresenting the Sunnah, you're misrepresenting the Sirah, there's a responsibility for people who know better to correct that mistake and to teach people what is correct. So I would have loved for others to do this kind of report. I would have loved for others, and many have done separate reports, like focusing on one article or two articles. But the bigger picture of what Yaqeen overall is about and what is their overall project, that level of critique, no one had been doing that. So we saw a need for it. We need to have a comprehensive review of what Yaqeen is distributing and putting out. And that's what we did. And many imams, many scholars have reached out to me and said, Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair to your team. You've put out an excellent report. We had no clue that Yaqeen was spreading this kind of deviance, spreading this kind of misguidance. Thank you for putting out this report. We had no clue.
yeah. Actually, when I was first reading your paper, that's actually the only disagreement I have with you. One of the
Which
few
is what?
disagreements I have with you. On the other parts, I actually agree with you. Like for example, I've seen a lot of people. I think I read in Brother Asadullah Ali's paper where he actually accuses you of using rhetorical arguments. He says that you use a lot of like questions, but it should not be taken as some kind of sincere question. Uh, but the funny thing is that when someone like Dr. Jalajal uses the same kind of questioning or same type of if arguments, uh, he doesn't seem to have an issue with it. I think it was a little bit inconsistent on his part. Uh,
I mean,
but
the Asadullah paper, I've multiple times invited him and or anyone from Yaqeen, Omar Soleiman, Jonathan Brown, Jalajil, whoever, come on, Muslim Skeptic. We'll have a conversation. If I have misunderstood or my team has misunderstood your arguments, then it should be very easy to defend that, right? It should be very easy to clarify what was the mistake. But they all refuse. Okay. You invited Asadullah to this stream, right?
yeah, I did.
Did he accept that?
No.
Okay. So why? Why can't he come and talk about it? Come and defend Justin Parrott. Like, we'll bring up the paper. I'll show you the quotes. Even though I haven't fully read this new updated version of the paper, I haven't read it fully, right? But I'm still willing. Let's look at the paper and see what's right and wrong about it. Tell me.
Uh, yeah, actually, I want to talk to you about this evolution thing. So recently, I've been seeing a lot of people on YouTube promoting this view of Dr. Jalajal. What are your views on that?
It's complete deviance and can even reach the level of kufr because he's denying explicit aspects of the Quran.
Can you tell us exactly what's the issue this is?
He's saying that humanity is partly descended from animals and microorganisms and the entire evolutionary tree. That's the problem.
Yeah. So, are you familiar with a man named Shoaib Ahmed Malik?
Yeah, he's the student of Jalajil.
Yeah, I was actually watching one of his stream, and it seems like he makes this argument that there are three positions in Sunni Islam that is acceptable, and he says that one of them is creationism, and the other is human exceptionalism, and the other is Adamic exceptionalism, and the other he says that no exception. So I think he's trying to say that Adamic exceptionalism, which is the idea that human beings interbred with other primates or whatever you call them, he seems to suggest that it is somehow an acceptable view.
It's not
But
acceptable. It conflicts directly with many texts of the Quran and Sunnah. Here, you share the screen and again, I'll show you.
okay, okay.
So we did a full refutation back in July of Jalajil's argument. We had critiqued it before in the Yaqeen review, but this is like a comprehensive critique of what Jalajil argues. Because Jalajil is arguing that Islam is 100% compatible with human evolution, is 100% compatible with Islam. So you have to go through this report to see all of the examples. But he, for example, makes this claim that the word human being is not
Yeah,
synonymous to Bani Adam.
yeah. Actually, Shoaib Ahmed Malik says the same thing.
Yeah, so go to this section, and then you'll see all of the statements of the scholars, all of the hadith, all of the Quran that says that, no, what are you talking about? How can you say that human being is not synonymous with Bani Adam? That means you can have human beings that are not descended from Adam.
Yeah. And I think there's a clear hadith from the Prophet ﷺ where he said that you shouldn't take pride in your lineage because you all come from Adam, and Adam comes from dirt. Right? It's a Sahih hadith. So I guess Dr. Jalajal, I don't know if you read that hadith or not, but I actually have a few notes here that if you'd like, I would like to share.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, hold on.
Jalajil uniquely divorces the connection between the creation of Adam with the start of humanity. He doesn't see that as a big problem.
Yeah. Uh, okay, hold on. Let me just share the screen. Okay.
Yeah, even look at this Quran, what this ayah. O mankind, fear your Lord who created you from a single soul. Ya ayyuhan nas. Okay, so Allah is talking about people, humanity. Fear your Lord who created you from a single soul, Adam.
Yeah.
So Jalajil is denying this ayah.
Let me just share the screen so you can see. Can you see it? Okay. So, so, so Brother Asadullah actually says the following here. The account of Adam that appears in the sacred text addresses Adam's direct creation without parents, his wife's creation from him, and the idea that the two of them were ancestral to all people on earth today. Those same texts are silent on what living organism existed on earth at the time. What do you have to say against this? Like he's saying that Islamic scripture doesn't say anything in regards to this.
That's false. It's not silent. Again, let me pull up the exact text. But the texts are demonstrably not silent on the existence of humans on earth prior to the descent of Adam alayhi salam, descent from Jannah. Adam alayhi salam, as proven above by text from the Quran and Sunnah, as well as the works of the scholars of the different Kalam schools, was the father of all humanity. All human beings that ever existed are therefore the direct descendants of Adam. So if they're the direct descendants, that means they could not have existed. There couldn't have been human beings who existed
Yeah.
when before Adam came to earth or at the same time as he came to earth, because they're his descendants.
Yeah, and another thing is that
And he said specifically, look, this is what the lam, the alif lam, this is a universal inclusion. Al insan or an nas is universal inclusion. So it means all human beings are the descendants of Adam. It doesn't leave any, the language does not leave any room for there to have been human beings other than the descendants of Adam. And logically, if you're a descendant of Adam, you couldn't have been existent prior to him on earth.
yeah, yeah. Now, now let me again share the screen. Okay. So therefore, nothing can be assumed about on a theological level, and Muslims are not required to have any specific beliefs about it. Theologians would therefore not have grounds to claim that Homo sapiens, as defined by biologists, is strictly sociological or genetic terms, were absent in the world before or during Adam's time. They would have to remain non-committal on the issue. So, bro, may I ask a question, which is that how do you then explain, uh, this existence of like different skulls and whatnot, and these evidences that they bring up? Like, for example, scientists do say that there were like different type of human beings.
Yeah, we don't. There can be many different types of body shapes, and they still be Banu Adam. Just like there are many different colors, we come in different sizes, we come in different shapes. So just because a skeleton is found and the scientist says, "Oh, this is a Neanderthal," or "This is a Denisovan," or "This is a pre-hominid," they have all kinds of terms. But is that skeleton of Banu Adam? That is something that the scientists can't comment on.
Yeah, and what's the funny thing is that the way they define species is that if two groups of animals can interbreed, right? And recently it came out that this Neanderthal actually interbred with humans. How's that possible if they're not the same species?
Yeah. I mean, Neanderthals, this is a scientific category or a scientific term, but all of the assumptions about the Neanderthal is based on this kind of progressivist, materialist idea that humanity is constantly getting more advanced and improving over time. So they project this idea that the Neanderthals must have been barbarian savages, no knowledge, no understanding, like basically like apes. But this is all projection. The skeleton doesn't say that or show that.
Yeah.
So why are you making the Neanderthal into this ape-like creature? We don't have to accept that. We can say that
They even have pictures. They
Yeah,
will
they
have
make these
pictures of
pictures
bearded,
that really
bearded man, Muslim-looking man.
yeah, they make him look like Muslims. But the point
Yeah.
is that, yeah, this is just your artistic license. You're just creating. This is not the scientific evidence. Is not showing all of this that you are projecting onto the bones, basically, or the fossils, rather. So this is like Muslims sometimes get confused. They say, "Oh, science says there's Neanderthals and they're human beings." No, we don't accept their distinctions and their taxonomy and their categories. We care about the logic, the logical relations.
Yeah.
But when we say Ben Adam, we say insan, we say annas, these words that are used in the Quran, these can encompass Neanderthal. They can encompass Denisovan or these other groups of fossils that are found. That projection of their backwards or whatever, that's not scientific.
Yeah, and even within Islamic scripture, you see that some prophets were bigger in size. Uh, some people were bigger in size. Like it didn't always were the same thing. There were differences.
Yeah.
Okay.
And even with Juj wa Ma'juj,
Yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah.
discussion, like, because they're definitely going to be, or they are physically deformed compared to normal human beings. But there's a discussion: aren't they Banu Adam as well?
But
And
Ak- but Aki, Yasirikadi says that Yajuj and Majuj are just waiting. What are you talking about?
yeah, they're going to come as zombies later. Subhanallah. So this is when you start opening yourself to this uncritical acceptance of whatever science says today. Then you have to start bending and distorting, changing Quran and Sunnah to match that, and that's when you get into deviance. But if you have a critical view, like just think logically about the scientific claims, what is really actually the science saying? Because sometimes scientists exaggerate. Sometimes scientists go beyond the evidence to give their theory. But if you look at the fossil record, there's nothing there that conflicts with Islam. There's nothing there that proves that humans descended from apes or evolved from apes. There's no proof of that. It's just the fossil and then a story that is projected onto those bones. And we can reject that logically and not contradict the existence of the fossils.
Yeah, and even like I was watching I think another thing that Shoaib Ahmed Malik does is that he kind of calls intelligent design a pseudoscience. Do you agree with that?
No. What's wrong with intelligent design?
I mean, I don't think he calls it pseudoscience, but he quotes scientists who call it pseudoscience.
Yeah, of course they quote it, but there are other many scientists who say, very high level respected scientists who say that, yeah, intelligent design is very scientific, and actually this is what the evidence shows. The evidence shows that that life itself and advanced biological structure like the cell, let alone an entire organism, they could not have arisen by chance. It's impossible, scientifically impossible.
Yeah.
And the only explanation is that there is some kind of intentional design or an intentional like intervention. That's the only scientific explanation, based on mathematics, based on chemical science, based on biological science. And there's a massive uh, bias and even conspiracy to silence anyone who will say otherwise. Because if you say otherwise, then you're blackballed.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to show you something. Let me just pull up the. Uh, if you actually Google on nature, uh,
Let's get this. All right, so look at this book, What Darwin Got Wrong,
yeah, yeah,
by Jerry Fodor and Massimo Palmarini. Massimo Palmarini is a evolutionary biologist, and Jerry Fodor, he died, but he's an atheist philosopher, like high-level philosopher. He was a professor at Rutgers University, and he wrote this book, What Darwin Got Wrong. It's a very good book. It's kind of technical, but in the beginning, he mentions how just criticizing Darwin as an atheist, he's not supporting creationism. He's just criticizing Darwinism and saying this is not an adequate explanation for the origins of life. He is being attacked. His job has been put at danger. People are telling him, don't publish this book. I agree with you. I agree with your arguments, but don't publish this book because it's
blasphemy.
going to... yeah. So, yeah, check out this book. It's a published book, and you can go to... He mentions all this in the introduction or the preface. And another person to look at is James Tour. James Tour, Tour, and he has many videos on YouTube, and he talks about and he's one of the most highly cited synthetic chemists, synthetic chemistry, and he talks all about how Darwinian evolution is not physically possible. It's not chemically possible, and he brings a lot of good arguments. So check James Tour out as well if you're
Okay,
confused
so
about this issue.
yeah, so let me share the screen. Hold on. Okay, so if you go to nature, if you type in intelligent design, this is what you get. And by the way, nature is considered one of the best kind of like
Yeah, top scientific journal.
top scientists. This is what they said. Look at this. Admission that intelligent design is a religious view.
So
Then
it's
it says,
saying that it's not scientific.
yeah, I think so. Then it says a reconfiguration. I mean, they don't have any article on this. That's the strange part.
So, I mean, yeah, of course. I'd be
They didn't.
surprised if they had any article on promoting intelligent design. That would
Yeah,
be a counter example to what I was saying.
yeah. Uh, Intelligent design gets political. By the way, these are all opinion pieces.
Yeah.
These are not like scientific journals. Peer review paper, defense theory of intelligent design. There's one. And intelligent design or intelligent laziness. So basically, all of these like articles, majority of them are attacking intelligent design. Scientists attack Bush over intelligent design. Like, let's check this out. Intelligent design or intelligent laziness. Much of the concern over IT has focused on veiled attempt to inject religion into public education. So this is an argument they constantly repeat. Like it's like a religious thing. It has nothing to do with science. Like, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, this is nonsense. This is just propaganda. This is anti-religious propaganda, because what the reality is that an honest investigation of the world will show that it cannot be just purely from materialism, purely random processes that generates order, that generates life. An honest investigation of the natural world. And this is exactly what the Quran says over and over and over again. Allah is constantly saying to see the ayat and reflect on the ayat that He has put in the world. These are all signs that point that any person, any honest, sincere person who sees it, and even insincere people, anyone who sees these signs will know that it cannot come from nothing, that there has to be a creator who has created them. This is what Allah says in the Quran. So for someone to deny that and say, no, it's all bogus, they don't really understand the Quran. They don't really understand Islam.
Yeah. So to get back to Brother Asadullah's paper, let me just share this again.
And I think that the argument from design, like
Yeah.
as an argument for God, that is what I think is the strongest argument for the existence of God.
Yeah.
Like there are many different philosophical arguments for the existence of God, cosmological argument, ontological argument. I think the best argument is the argument from design. It's the argument that most appeals to the human sense and the human mind, is this argument. And that's why it's constantly referred to or alluded to in the Quran.
Yeah, even like it's just common sense. If you look at nature, I mean, why would nature like invoke these feelings or this kind of rationalization?
It's
So
complete human experience. Like even as children, like even children understand that the world is made for a purpose. Like the world is not just random with no purpose. Like that's an instinct that we all have. And then also, there is no example of something that just pops into existence, or something that goes from a state of disorder to a state of order. We don't suddenly see, things coming from the ground and ordering themselves in perfect, order like that unless there's someone who is doing it, right? So then it's a very obvious analogy, like the universe as a whole with all its order, or the human body with all its order and precision. How could that be just random? How could that be no intentional design to that?
Well, I've heard Dr. Shoaib Ahmed Malik saying that just because something is random, it doesn't mean that like God is not involved. I don't know what that means, but I think he's trying to say that, even then, like it doesn't deny God. So we can accept evolution just fine.
The
Like,
the reason that we deny evolution is not because of occasionalism, which is what he's referring to. We deny it because it conflicts with clear nas, clear statements from the Quran and Sunnah. That's why we deny it. That's why we deny the evolution of human beings. Now, if you want to say that other animals could have evolved,
yeah,
whatever, I'm not going to say that Islam explicitly denies the evolution of a dog
yeah,
or a cat.
yeah,
I don't think that evolution is correct in all of those cases, but I can't say there's an Islamic argument to deny the evolution of a cat or an evolution of a bear.
yeah,
But the evolution of human beings, I can deny on the basis of Quran and Sunnah. Islam denies explicitly the evolution of human beings from previous life forms. And the fact that Jalajil and Yaqeen Institute are promoting that shows that they don't understand Islam, they don't understand the clear text of the Quran and the Sunnah, and that they are willfully promoting an extremely deviant view that can take many Muslims into kufr and disbelief.
yeah. One thing I liked about your article was that you're very careful to not actually call them deviants, but instead you said that they're promoting kind of like deviant views, which I liked in your article because you didn't like make takfir on them. But some places I saw in Brother Asadullah's paper, he actually said that you accused them of kufr. Is this true?
I never said that Asadullah is a kafir.
No, 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 not Brother Asadullah, but like some of the Yaqeen writers.
I never said that any of them are kuffar,
Okay.
and neither does the report.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I thought so too. I thought it was a misinterpretation. So there's actually another argument that Shoaib Ahmed Malik makes, and it's interesting. So there's a stream, and someone actually asked this question, which is that, well, doesn't lineage in Islamic tradition comes from the father, right? We all know this. So what happens if you have a like a father from this primate side and a mother from the human side? Does that mean they're not human? Right? I mean, like if we accept this bizarre interpretation, doesn't that mean that we have human-like beings, but they're not human?
This is nonsense.
Yeah, but his response to that was that, the Sharia was different at the time of Adam. So maybe they were not human back then. So maybe they're human now. I'm not saying he exactly said that, but it was kind of hand waving away this like problem. But the thing is that the reason it's extremely problematic is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says that genealogy or like lineage comes from the father. So it's not a matter of like different prophets and different Sharia. For example, here, if you read this, Ibn Umar reported, the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, said, when Allah gathers the earlier and later generation on the day of resurrection, he will raise a banner for every treacherous person. It will be announced that this is the treachery of this person, the son of this person, right?
Yeah.
So it's clear that uh, it's the genealogy in Islam is from the father's side. And another hadith, if you read this, it's Sunan Abi Dawud, 4948. It says, it is narrated with a Zayed Isnad from Abu Darda that he said, the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings upon him, said, you will be called on the day of resurrection by your names and the names of your fathers. So choose good names for yourself. So what does that mean? That means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself is clarifying that your genealogy comes from your father, right? So if we have a situation, like for example, in the Hadith, when Prophet ﷺ says that your father is Adam and he comes from dust, that means that if you have a situation where the father is from this primate side, and the the mother is from the human side, that can't exist because that means the Prophet is a lie. Auzubillah, right? Because he is completely goes against the Hadith. So it's a completely unacceptable view, in my opinion.
I pointed out these kinds of things to Asadullah actually on Twitter because Asadullah was talking some kind of nonsense, and I was pointing out like you because he was trying to defend Jalajil, and I was pointing out to him in a tweet. I responded to his tweet saying that you realize that what Jalajil is advocating for is kufr basically, or is a denial. I can't remember the exact wording of the tweet, but I was criticizing that, and I saying, "Don't you realize?" And then Asadullah never responded, and he deleted his Twitter account. So I don't know why he can't like recognize the problem with what Jalajil is saying. Is he just confused? He doesn't understand the issue. Maybe he hasn't studied enough. But why are you going out of your way to defend such a nonsense paper? Like you're better than that. You should be smarter than that. Don't defend trash. Like just acknowledge that this is garbage, and our institute is all the worse for publishing it and causing confusion. Just be honest. Like what? There's people will look up to you and respect you much more if you're going to acknowledge the really egregious mistakes that your institute is making. Instead of defending them, you're being dragged into the muck.
Yeah, and the thing is that the Hadith is so clear, right? Like Prophet ﷺ literally says that all of you comes from Adam, all of you. So if there's some mixed breed or something, that means they're not part of human, but that's not possible because he's saying all of you.
Exactly.
So yeah, um, and by the way, another thing I wanted to ask you, which is that one of the issues that I pointed out with Brother Asadullah's paper is that he actually accused you of being dishonest, and his reasoning was that you committed a lot of logical fallacies, and that can imply dishonesty somehow. But it seems contradictory to me because he himself said that logical fallacies implies mistake. But if you're making a mistake, then how can you be dishonest? Because dishonest means you're doing it intentionally, right?
No, like yeah, you can make a mistake intentionally. You can make a logical fallacy intentionally.
Okay. Okay.
So what he's saying is that I'm deliberately making these logical fallacies. I know what a logical fallacy is. I've studied logical fallacies, and the fact that I'm supposedly, according to him, making logical fallacies means that I know better. It must be dishonesty. It must be
Yeah, but
dishonesty.
how
That's
does
what
he know
I know.
that? Isn't
No,
intention something impossible to prove?
no, you can't. No, you can. You can have high suspicion or غلبة الظن, like overwhelming suspicion that someone is being dishonest. For example, if I selectively quote something to misrepresent a position, right? And you mentioned this in your stream. You're with Edward Moat's paper.
Yeah, yeah.
So Edward Moat's paper. So what Asadullah accuses me of doing is selectively quoting. So in that report, he's saying we selectively quote Edward Moat to attribute liberalism to him, to say that he is advocating liberalism,
Yeah, yeah.
and you selectively quoted him. So this is dishonest. So
Yeah.
I'll say that if it were true that we selectively quoted to make it seem like Edward Moat is arguing for something that he's not really arguing for, then yes, that would be dishonest. I concede it would be dishonest to do that. But I mean, it's not true because Edward Moat is defending liberalism in the
Yeah.
whole paper. He's trying to give
Yeah,
it
yeah.
an Islamic liberalism.
Islamic liberalism, yeah.
So the same thing like with all of his critiques are like this. Like he just doesn't understand. Like he deliberately does not talk about what is the whole paper about. Like what is like
Yeah.
with the Jalajil paper, he's criticizing our report for like cutting off a sentence, like if cutting off an
Yeah,
if
if.
of a quote.
Yeah.
And he's saying that you cut off the if to make it seem like Jalajil is denying XYZ.
Yeah.
And then, but the point is, yeah, sometimes you have to quote for the flow of the reader. You will select it. You will, have a quote in a certain way as an editorial decision. But we didn't distort Jalajil's actual view.
Yeah, the main argument was still solid. Like it's like that doesn't really affect like your main argument.
Yeah, so we on Muslim Skeptic there was an entire paper showing how confused Asadullah is about this.
So let me pull up some more quotes from Asadullah's paper. Uh, so
And again, like we're talking about Asadullah, we're talking about his paper. He had an opportunity to come and talk to us too, but he denied that. He told you explicitly no.
yeah, he told me that he has to. Well, I'm not sure if I should say it, but maybe I can tell you offline, or maybe not. I probably shouldn't say it. But regardless, so the thing that I wanted
Yeah,
to
my
show
point
you.
is that he had many opportunities to come
Yeah,
and talk directly, and
yeah.
he hasn't taken those opportunities.
Okay, so then let's talk about Dr. Nazir Khan. So in your paper, you said the following. One of the Yaqeen's research director, Nazir Khan, explains Sharia as follows. In Arabic, Sharia literally means a path, and its principles are famously outlined by scholars when discussing the five maqasid al-Sharia, the preservation of human life, faith, intellect, wealth, family. It represents a holistic approach to increasing prosperity in society. It is strange to limit the scope of Sharia to increasing prosperity in society without mentioning the hereafter or prosperity of the family or spiritual prosperity of the heart or any number of the other things. The Sharia is a straight path, of course, but it is a path to Allah, not a path to social prosperity or some other humanistic ends. Then Brother Astullah replies, from the very beginning, Daniel commits what is known as the fallacy of scope. So, can you explain what a fallacy of scope is?
Fallacy of scope means I'm like only focusing on one quote and not taking the entire corpus of Nazar Khan's work or writing.
Okay.
So I've
So,
limited the scope of my critique. So it's
okay.
like it's cherry picking basically.
Okay. Okay.
As
Good.
far as I understand what that fallacy of scope means, I don't know what
Okay.
Asadullah means by that, but that's what I understand from it.
Okay. So, which is improperly changing or misrepresenting the scope of a phrase. He fallaciously limits the scope of Dr. Khan's phrase, the Sharia represents a holistic approach to increasing prosperity in society, to material worldly prosperity devoid of spirituality and family. But this is clearly a misrepresentation. Not only does Daniel fail to offer evidence in support of his assertion, he neglects statements within the very same paragraph which run contrary to it. Khan clearly states that among the five objectives of the Sharia, the preservation of faith, family are crucial because faith and family make up a society. They aren't alien to it. Therefore, by making this objection, is Daniel inferring society doesn't include one's faith and family? This is absurd. So, what do you say in response to this? Like he's saying that you know, well, like in your paper, you said that why doesn't he mention spirituality or the hereafter, right? He's saying that well, the the family aspect is related to the hereafter. So, and I think, and here I actually pointed this out. I think he missed the point because you're trying to. I think from what I get of it, you're trying to point out that he doesn't really mention the hereafter, like the end goal, right?
Yeah. So can you share my screen?
Okay, hold on. Let me just. Okay.
Oh, it's sharing the wrong screen. Uh, Let me see. Hold on. Okay, can you see? All right, so this is the context.
Okay.
So what the report is, this is from Muslim Skeptic reviewing yaqeen. So the context of this section is that Yaqeen Institute is giving an overly humanistic interpretation of the Sharia. And there are examples of this in a lot of reports or a lot of the articles from Yaqeen. This is like a whole section on Sharia. So this is just the intro. This is the intro, and it's giving a few examples. So what Nazar Khan is saying in that particular paper, it's a very problematic paper. I don't know if it's still up on Yaqeen. Maybe they deleted it. But this is what he says. He says he's talking about the 5 maqasid of the Sharia, which you read. But then the Sharia represents a holistic approach to increasing prosperity in society. So this is like the point of the Sharia.
Yeah.
Is that the case? Like, is that the point of the Sharia? To increase prosperity in society?
No. Like
So that's my problem. So I'm not making like a huge, like here, we're not making a huge deal about this. It's only one data point as of an example. Like, okay, maybe like he misspoke. Maybe Nazar Khan misspoke. Maybe he like, but it's just one example of like, why would you describe the Sharia like this and ignore Sharia means obedience to Allah. It means submitting to Allah. It means worshiping Allah. That's the main point of Sharia. And yeah, prosperity for society, preserving your wealth, your family, marriage. These are also important. But the main point is increasing your love for Allah and your worship of Allah.
Yeah.
So I'm not making here a big, like when I read it now, I'm not saying that, okay, this shows that Yaqeen Institute is a secular institution and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
This is just one piece of evidence in light of many other things, in light of all of these other articles. Or like here, that I talk about, or here, look, in Yaqeen's introductory YouTube video, the first thing that Omar Suleiman says, the most beautiful part of the Muslim community is how strongly we stand together to benefit humanity. This is a very strong statement. The most beautiful part? Why are you constantly making Islam about serving humanity? This is a humanist gloss. Even if I'm talking to non-Muslims, I'd be very careful not to say, yeah, we're just humanists, we want the benefit of all humanity. No, Islam is about submission to Allah. If I told you, define Islam, what is the most important thing in Islam? Would you say benefiting humanity?
The worshipping Allah.
Any basic Muslim, anyone, me, you, any Muslim will say that. Islam means submission. It means worshiping God. It means serving God. So why are they saying the most beautiful work? So this is another data point. So if by itself, if an imam said this somewhere, okay, I'm not going to make a big deal about it. You're not going to make a big deal about it. Maybe he misspoke, but it's part of a pattern. It's part of a pattern. So here's another statement. Nazar Khan reiterates Suleiman's point in another article when he says, achieving a positive impact on humanity is the holiest of ambitions. So they're using what are called superlatives. Superlatives means like something is the best, something is the most holy, something is the greatest. So that's a very strong statement to say it's the holiest of ambitions. Do you see that?
Yeah.
It's a good ambition. It's
part of it.
Yeah, it's part of it.
You even talked about it in the paper, but it's not the only thing.
Exactly.
So I actually called out this. This is actually a logical fallacy, if I'm not mistaken. It's called logic chopping, which is like kind of missing the point. So basically, he kind of attacks random things in here.
Yeah. So, these are data points, and all of these data points in our report are meant as an introduction to the bigger section where we go into more evidence of the humanism and liberalism found in Yaqeen's paper. So even this, like, to make it seem like, oh, we just made this point and we're making a big deal about it, that would be uncharitable. if that's what we did do, like we just left it at that, like these isolated quotes, and we said, "See, Yaqeen is a liberal institute." Yeah, that would be unfair. That would be uncharitable. But that's not what we're doing here. That's not what we're doing. This is an intro, bringing some data points as an introduction to the larger discussion of what Yaqeen Institute has in all of its different papers.
Yeah, and another thing I've noticed is that when you read an Yakin article, they always mention these things like words, catchphrases like human rights. Like I talked about it in my stream, where I think it's a Justin Parrott. He was mentioning things like goodwill, kindness, and then he somehow attributes these things to human rights. But when it comes to Western atrocities, they oftentimes don't use that word. Like, for example, I think I have it here. But Nazir Khan, in his paper, he actually talks about this that, in Middle Eastern countries, uh, actually, I think I have it here. Let me just show it to you. Okay. Okay. Okay, here. Nazir Khan, he says, by the way, I have all the references. I'll put them in the link below, inshallah. So this is what Nazir Khan writes in his paper. What factors influenced the growth of terrorist movements like Al-Qaeda and its even more abominable offspring ISIS? Uh, Psychologically, what transformation must occur in the mind of a human being in order to make him capable of such savagery? Look at the word he used. He says savagery. So when Muslims commit a crime, it's savagery, right? Then look at what the word he uses later on to describe Western kind of atrocities. A traumatized population is a vulnerable population. It provides a ripe context for emergence of violent movement with unprecedented savagery. Again, he's using the word savagery to describe Muslims. Ian Robertson, professor of psychology and neuroscientist, explained that whether it be Nazi, again, Muslims equal Nazis, I guess. Anyway, Nazi genocide of Jews, Gypsies, and the disabled, and the Serbian massacre of Bosnian, or the Khmer rogue slaughtering Cambodians, the origins of human savagery, again, remain constant in spite of disparate ideologies. He points out that ISIS is fueled by population exposed to, again, savagery. Like he continuously uses the word savagery to describe Muslim population and the rhetoric of revenge. What's interesting is then he goes on to describe the Western atrocities, and he never uses this word. And look at this. This is what he wrote. After decades of oppressive regime and sanction, which killed 227,000 Iraqi children between 1991 to 1998, 45, the situation went from bad to worse with the 2003 invasion of Iraq, which had catastrophic consequences of the region. Some estimated of the number of Iraqis killed within 3 years of the 2003 invasion reached almost as high as 700,000. The extent of suffering in this region is difficult to fathom. One simple aspect of the severity may be appreciated by following statistic. The city of Fallujah alone, 14 times as many radiation-related birth defects than Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. 47 many of the severe deformities affecting newborn babies had previously never been encountered by physician. So again, I wrote this. So when it comes to Muslim violence, he described them as savage and barbaric. However, when it comes to Western powers, he's like completely silent. So
What
what
do
are
you
your
mean?
thoughts on this?
Wait, why is he completely silent? He's talking about Fallujah and Iraq, and
Yeah, like he doesn't use the word savagery. Like he doesn't use anything. He just acts like it's just a normal thing.
maybe I don't know. I haven't read those sections to know. Like you, like that's a hard argument to make. Like
Yeah, but I mean, I've noticed that maybe he's doing it unintentionally. Obviously, I'm not accusing him of this, but it seems like he constantly, when it comes to describing groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda, he uses the word savagery, but he never uses that type of language when it comes to describing Western atrocities.
I think they would. I don't think they would. I think that they consider it savagery too. But
Yeah, maybe, but he doesn't say it. Like when it goes, and the thing is, like, okay, I understand that, like that's obviously bad. No one is saying that that's a good thing, but the thing is, like, we're talking about a population that is, we're talking about victims, right? So why use the words like savagery? Like like why call them savage? It just seems a very kind of like inhuman thing to do. Like these are human beings.
Yeah.
Uh, anyway, so another place and another thing is that when it comes to suffering of the Muslims, like in the Middle East, uses the word human rights and freedom instead of things like their Sharia laws are being violated. For example, he says here, it is easy to see how each of these factors have been involved in the recent history of the Middle East. Of all places in the Muslim world, this region suffered under the most abusive of dictatorship for a century, with a populace subjugated and stripped of basic human rights and freedoms. So, why do you think they always equivocate human rights and freedom with Muslim suffering instead of saying like their Sharia rights are being violated or Islamic laws are being violated?
Well, the biggest problem is that so many articles and videos on yaqeen are promoting this liberal human rights concept and this principle of religious freedom as a value universally, and saying that Islam endorses religious freedom, like UN kind of human rights regime. Islam supports all of these kinds of international liberal humanitarian laws. And it doesn't. Islam does not support a lot of these aspects of modern human rights. But they are not. I mean, they have an article on human rights, but and it brings up criticisms of human rights. I believe I haven't read it in a long, long time, but the point is that so many of the articles, as pointed out in our review, promotes a kind of human rights liberal understanding of morality, and that's problematic because it conflicts with Islam. And if a Muslim reads the Sirah, reads what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was doing, read what the Quran commands, it's not liberal. It's not liberal. It's this is what atheists are constantly pointing out. This is what,
What are you talking about? It's not gay friendly,
yeah,
LGBT friendly.
yeah, the Quran doesn't doesn't endorse diversity of gender fluidity and orientation. So that's what unfortunately, that's what a lot of Muslim youth actually do believe. They believe that Islam is 100% compatible with, joining an LGBT pride parade or march. They think Islam is 100% pro gay rights. And who is helping them with that misunderstanding? It's yaqeen. It's yaqeen when they have an article up for many years saying that Muslims can support, Muslims should advocate and endorse many LGBT rights. So
Yeah, I
they're
think I
feeding
think
into the problem. They're feeding into this liberal mindset. And whenever we criticize them, they get offended and they say, "Oh, you're misrepresenting us," or "Oh, you don't understand."
yeah, I think Justin Parrott even says that that we should make political reconciliation or something like that. Uh,
With who?
I don't know. He never says it. He just said this. Okay, I think it's that article where he talks about kind of like what Islam promotes. Kind of Islam promotes goodwill, and all these three things, and then he equivocates that with human rights. And then at one point, I think he says that therefore we should find political reconciliation or something. I have the quote here. I'll show it to you. I think. Uh, okay, so this is actually what Asadullah wrote in his paper. Also, what is the problem with Dr. Khan asserting the Sharia represents holistic approach to increasing prosperity in society? The Sharia as for society's prosperity both in the dunya and the akhirah. Indeed, although the word it means a path, it is a path to Allah, not a path to Allah, as Daniel so carelessly misconstrues, which makes man prosperous in all his affairs. So he's saying, what's wrong with taking a holistic approach? What do you have to say to that? Like he's saying that it's a path to Allah, it's not the path.
I don't understand. Like, what's he? Dr. Nazar Khan. The quote is, He's talking about the Sharia. It represents a holistic approach to increasing prosperity in society. I don't deny that the Sharia, aspects of the Sharia, are about increasing people's prosperity in society. My problem is, and the report's problem is, that you are summarizing this as the whole point of Sharia
Yeah.
in your article and saying you are saying that this is what the Sharia is. To someone who doesn't know what the Sharia is, like imagine like one of these woke leftist atheists, what is Sharia? Asking, what is Sharia? And someone says, oh, Sharia has been misrepresented by the extremist jihadists.
I mean, they think kangaroos are halal.
Yeah. Sharia,
Is
this is
kangaroos and
completely
snails are
misrepresented.
haram?
Yeah, Sharia actually is just about increasing prosperity. It's just a way. It's just a holistic approach to increasing prosperity in society. Now, would you say that that's an adequate explanation of what the Sharia is, or is that a
No.
good way to describe what the Sharia is? No, it's not. It's an inaccurate way, and it gives the wrong impression. It gives the wrong impression to an audience that already has a problem with liberalism. They already have a problem with thinking that Islam is exactly like human rights liberalism. That's the misconception that people already have, and you're just continuing to feed into it instead of correcting it and saying that Sharia represents the path to Allah, it represents worship of Allah, it represents submission to Allah. And it also has these other aspects that are benefit society. But that's the main point. It's reorienting the human being to his maker, to his creator. That's the main point of the Sharia. But if you're influenced by liberalism or you're catering to a liberal audience, you might de-emphasize that aspect and then say and instead say something like the Sharia represents a holistic approach to increasing prosperity in society.
Yeah. So let's continue. Let's see another. Okay, so just humanity, this humanistic doctrine. Okay, so this is what he says in his paper. In response to Sheikh Omar Suleiman's statement, he asks a very rudimentary question regarding Islamic doctrine. Were humans created to serve humanity or worship Allah? Here, Daniel commits the false dichotomy fallacy, which is a false dilemma fallacy that limits you unfairly to two choices by assuming that these two actions somehow differ from one another. So, what is your kind of response to that? He's saying that when you're saying when Sheikh Umar Salman says that the best part of Muslim Ummah is to like how we benefit humanity, he's saying that when you said that why doesn't he mention that what isn't it supposed to be that we're worshiping Allah? And he said, isn't this you're creating a false dilemma? Like he's saying that basically Omar Salman is not denying it.
Let me find the. So go share my screen again. Like it's again, this was part of the intro to this section. And I just mentioned it. Like the problem with it is that he's using a superlative. He's saying the most beautiful part.
Yeah.
That's the problem. That by itself is clearly problematic. Okay? And again, it's not in isolation. This is part of many examples that we're bringing. Then, we can ask, were humans created to serve humanity or to worship Allah? This is very explicit in the Quran, why human beings were created. In Surah Al-Dhariyat, Allah says,
Yeah.
I did not create jinn and human beings except to worship me. Except for worship. Illa liya'budun. Except for the purpose of worship.
Yeah.
So that is an explicit statement. So yeah, you can say that, well, part of worshiping Allah can be maybe like in the overall obedience to Allah, being good to your parents is part of the obedience to Allah.
Yeah.
But this is, the point is that the most beautiful part, like this is the superlative that he's using. That's what's problematic. So why not? You're not saying that, and that's what's
Yeah.
problematic.
Yeah. So, by the way, may I ask, bro, did you actually reach out to like some of the Yakin writers before you wrote this paper?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I was at Yaqeen. I was an employee of Yaqeen.
What?
Yeah,
Like,
Justin
Brother
Parrott's.
Astullah actually never mentions this, that you tried to contact them or anything.
He wouldn't necessarily know. I mean, he somehow knows a lot of details about my being at Yaqeen without talking to me, but he
Oh,
didn't. He missed
yeah,
that
yeah. Yeah, actually, I wanted to bring that up as well. He actually says that at the time you were at Yaqeen, you were very supportive of Sheikh Umar Sulaiman. And then he says that later on, only later on, you came to kind of like started criticizing Yaqeen and all the other kind of like.
Why
It's,
is that? Why is that surprising, or why is that like? Is that contradiction? Is it can you have one opinion of someone and then you learn something about that person and then your opinion changes?
yeah, it happens.
Yeah,
I mean,
I admit, I thought very high. Why would I go and join Yaqeen Institute? Why would I move my entire family from one part of the country to another part of the country to join this institute and to help them and be their director of research if I didn't think highly of Omar Suleiman? Of course, I thought highly of him because I was duped. I was duped. I didn't know what was Yaqeen actually going to be about, and I found out what it's actually about. So my
yeah,
opinion changed, based on facts.
yeah. Another thing I think Asadullah, Brother Asadullah points out, which is that uh, in his paper, he says that you do a lot of kind of like correlation meets causation, kind of like fallacious assumption, which is that, oftentimes, for example, Dalia Mokat, she went to this, I believe it's CVE or counterintelligence or somewhere to give like a counter argument to some of the things that they were saying. And then he says that you act as if like he went there to support them or something like that. So, can you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, this is so stupid. That so here's a scenario for you. There is a governmental program designed to police Muslims, to spy on Muslims, to report Muslims to law enforcement, and ultimately involve the Muslim community with terrorism charges, extremism charges. That's what CVE is, countering violent extremism. They have programs in Canada, the US, the UK. In the UK, it's called Prevent. And the whole point of Prevent and CVE is to involve the good Muslims. Okay? We want to work with good Muslims to police the radical Muslims. The radical Muslims who are preaching against LGBT, the radical Muslims that are intolerant, the radical Muslims that do takfir, the radical Muslims that are teaching that, men are the heads of the household and they're anti-feminist. These radicals, we need to police them.
Yeah.
Okay? So this is something that is a governmental program. And then there's a Muslim imam who says, "Oh, I'm just working with them. I'm helping the Muslim community." What would you say to that? Would you have a good opinion of that imam? Would you trust that imam? Would you want to follow that imam or go to his masjid when he's going to the government and helping us? He's helping the Muslim community. Like, think about that. And the reality is that what's interesting is that liberal Muslims in the US, part of this social justice, like the social justice warrior Muslims in the US, are anti CVE, they're anti police, they're anti these governmental departments. And rightly so, because these departments are attacking the Muslim community and spying on the Muslim community and detaining innocent Muslims, putting Muslims on no-fly lists so they can't travel. So the funny thing is that the social justice Muslims in the era of Trump, became completely anti these government programs. But what happened is there are all these other liberal Muslims that were involved in the programs, like Dalia Mujahid. But when Obama was involved in these programs and policing the Muslim community, it was okay. But then Trump became president, and then okay, now we have to disassociate. We're not going to reveal the fact that we were involved in all of these programs. So they hid it. They hid it from the Muslim community because otherwise they would get canceled. They would get canceled by their own base, the liberal Muslims. So they hid it and they don't advertise it. But this history is there, public record. People like Dalia Mujahid, okay, or some of these other yaqeen affiliates like Tahir Wyatt, were and still sometimes still are involved in governmental programs to police the Muslim community, counter radicalization. They're working with the authorities to oppress Muslims. So is there a problem with this? Of course there's a problem with this. Asadullah himself admitted that he was a part of a CVE program. He admitted that himself in one of his
Yeah,
live streams.
he was part of. Yeah, but he was in Malaysia, I think.
Yeah, these CVE programs exist in the Muslim world too. This is American control, all in Egypt, in Saudi, in many of these countries. They work with the governments to crack down on political Islam.
Actually,
And obviously they say, oh, we're just fighting terrorism. Yeah, of course they say that, but the reality is they're cracking down on any kind of political Islam.
are you familiar with the situation in Bangladesh?
Yeah.
So today, actually, 3 Muslims were shot. Basically, what happened is there was like a riot with some Hindu celebrations were happening, and there were some riots. And what happened is that 3 Muslims were shot. But the headline became is that Muslims, these violent jihadists, are attacking this, uh, you know, this Hindu temple or like Hindu area.
So what if someone came up to you and said, like some YouTuber came and said, yeah, I work with the Bangladeshi police because I'm fighting terrorism. You have a problem? You like terrorism? What would you say to someone like that?
Yeah, another thing is that it's funny in Bangladesh on Facebook there was actually a picture of kind of like this counterterrorism uh, pamphlet or something. They were basically said that they caught this terrorist extremist, and they have like books of like normal Islamic books. Like some of those books are here like Sira, and some of those like Hadith. Like none of these are like extremists by
Exactly.
any means.
Exactly. That's all. That's exactly what Yaqeen is doing. That's what Yaqeen is doing in many of their articles, like Nazir Khan's articles. He's pointing to things that are a part of Islam, right? And he's
Yeah.
saying these are this is what jihadist extremists do. And then you have these members of Yaqeen Institute who are involved in these programs. That's what our report details. It details all of these links. So again, like you have a friend, like do you know what's the genealogy of Bangladesh's counter extremism, counter terrorism program that they're now cracking down on imams, they're cracking down on scholars? The origin of that is what? Who taught them this?
Groups, FBI, I imagine.
It was India, right? India has a big part. Modi, the BJP, has a big
Yeah.
part of it, right? Where did
Yeah.
the BJP learn this stuff? Israel.
Really?
Israel created this kind of program with the BJP for cracking down on Muslims. So Israel also works with the FBI. Israel also works with the U.S. government, Department of Homeland Security, for their counter-extremism programs, their counterintelligence programs. And many members of Yaqeen are a part or were a part of these programs.
Yeah. So someone actually asked me to ask you this question. Ask Daniel, what's his view on Asadullah Ali's view on punishment for apostasy article? So yeah, I was actually going to ask you this. What is your view? Like he says that it's not applicable because it's akin to something like someone doing wudu without having hands. So basically, the argument he's trying to make is that we don't have a caliphate anymore, or kind of like the system that had we previously had. So this type of laws doesn't apply or something like that. I'm not sure. I haven't read that article yet, so I haven't actually made it. But what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I didn't read the article, but it sounds like a laugh riot. He the why is Asadullah writing these articles anyway? Like, he's not a scholar. Like, his knowledge is very, very low. It's very obvious from what he says. Like, one article of his that I did, like, someone sent me and I saw it. He's giving, like, he's doing his tafsir of Surah Al-Tariq about
Yeah,
how,
yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah. So I read this like a couple of years ago or a while back.
Yeah, the article, he says that basically, you know how Dr. Zakir Naik, he uses this argument, scientific arguments, and I actually thought that article was very problematic because he says that these tabloid apologists. I mean, seriously, Zakir Naik is a tabloid apologist. Anyway, so he says that this they're using these arguments, which is kind of like insulting to the prophet because how come he didn't know this? However, he seems to have no problem with Dr. Jalajal's argument for evolution. So
Yeah, I mean, there's so many inconsistencies. But what struck me about that article uh, was Asadullah saying that he's giving a novel interpretation, like a unprecedented interpretation of these verses in Surah Al-Tariq, which just blows my mind. Like, what gives you the right to do tafsir of the Quran and say that you know better than all of these other tafsir, all of these other exegetes of the Quran? You know better than Qurtubi. You know better than Ibn Kathir. You know better than Jalaluddin Suyuti. You know better than all of these ulama of tafsir. You're going to disagree with all of them and give your own interpretation. Like, are you out of your mind? Like, it clearly, he doesn't understand what tafsir is. Tafsir is not just your own opinion, like, oh, this makes sense. Let me do an analysis of the lugha, of the language of the Quran, and let me do an analysis of this, and I'm going to come up with my interpretation. It's a joke. Like,
yeah, I've noticed this actually. It kind of seems like a pattern, which is that a lot of kind of like this, how should I say it, philosophy bros, they kind of scoff at people like Zakir Naik for using kind of like the scientific arguments. And I think this kind of things were popularized by Brother Astullah, I think. And I do think they have a point, but I think Dr. Zakir Naik doesn't kind of use like kind of very a sure argument. Like he uses if arguments, right? Like for example, if you read certain verses, it seems like it gives a very correct interpretation of natural phenomena. So and at one point it kind of seems like a pattern. So how do you explain that pattern? Like it's a very good argument, I think. What are your thoughts on that? Like, why do you think they kind of like reject it out of hand? Do you think it's a good idea? Like
no, I think that there is and I've written about this, that some of the scientific miracles arguments, some of them go way too far,
yeah,
and they're just not plausible. But that doesn't mean like the whole concept is trash.
yeah, yeah.
So in certain aspects, like, yeah, it's actually miraculous. Like, no one could have known this in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I agree. Like, there can be excesses, but you don't throw the whole thing in the trash.
Yeah.
Yeah, philosophy bros.
I don't know. It
Yeah,
just
so
feels like
apostasy, like talking about fiqh. Where has Asadullah studied fiqh? Like, does he even know the basics of tahara? And like, has he read Kitab al-Tahara? Has he read Kitab al-Salat? Where has he studied fiqh such that now he's doing his own ijtihad on this very advanced issue of blasphemy and apostasy, ridda? Like any actual student of knowledge or scholar or imam would just laugh at that. Like, it's just good for other aspiring philosophy bros on YouTube. Like, that's the only value that it has. Anyone else who knows anything would just laugh. Like, who is this? Same with Jonathan Brown. I mean, I did a video like, what are Jonathan Brown's qualifications? He's put on this pedestal of being like this authority to speak about hudud and to speak about salvation in Islam. And one of his papers was just so outrageous that he was arguing that people who are mushrikeen, they're mushrikeen, they're doing shirk, and the message of Allah reaches them, Islam reaches them, and they reject it, and then they die. Are they going to be forgiven by Allah? And Jonathan Brown says, yeah, maybe. Jonathan Brown says maybe, when in reality, Allah says in the Quran very clearly that He does not forgive shirk. He can forgive anything. He can forgive anything, but He does not forgive shirk. So if someone dies unrepentantly, they committed shirk, and they discover the truth, they did not repent, then they
Yeah.
will not be forgiven.
Okay, so someone commented, Jonathan Brown is more qualified than Daniel, to be honest. What do you have to say
Okay,
there?
prove it. Prove it.
By the way, it's an argument I hear a lot. Even they throw this against me, like, Daniel's not qualified. He can do tafsir and stuff like
I don't
that.
do tafsir. I don't do that. I'm not like Asadullah. I'm not a master of tafsir that I can go and do my own interpretation of different surah of the Quran. Nowhere do I do tafsir. Nowhere do I do ijtihad like Jonathan Brown and the mujtahid Asadullah.
I mean, now to be fair to Brother Astullah, one of the things that he points out is that uh, well, you could argue that even though he doesn't have qualification, that doesn't necessarily mean he's wrong, right? I mean,
No, it
for
doesn't.
example, if
For certain things, okay, you don't need qualifications for basics of Islam. You don't need qualifications, for example, to know certain basics about Islam. Like someone is promoting gay rights, you don't need to be an imam of Islam or a mujtahid to know that that's messed up and there's something really wrong there. You don't need to be a mujtahid or even a student of knowledge to know that if someone says that humans have evolved from apes and that you and me could be descended from apes, you don't need to be a mujtahid to know that that's wrong, or a scholar or a student of knowledge, because it's very clearly disagreeing with the Quran, clear verses of the Quran. But to do your own novel tafsir, to give your own interpretation, like this is what the Quran means, or this issue, all of the scholars of Islam have said that for ridda, for apostasy, there is a punishment. Whether that is execution or is it life in prison, all the scholars have said that. And you're saying, no, it doesn't apply now. It's not relevant. I mean, I agree. There's no khalifa to apply it. But that's not the question. The question is that if there was a khalifa, if there were khilafa on earth with a khalifa, should it be applied? Should it be applied at that time?
yeah, I mean, Prophet ﷺ himself said this, right? I mean, the thing is that he should be a role model, and he applied these laws. His subsequent generations applied these laws. They didn't have an issue with it. I mean, it's not like the times were always the same. They were always kind of like different situation, but they always applied these laws. So it's not like we can just get rid of them. That doesn't make any sense. Uh,
They're saying
and
they're not applicable, or they're not, like, now we're in different times. And these are the arguments that you'll find in multiple yaqeen articles. There's a
yeah,
difference of zaman wa makan. Nazar Khan invokes this principle.
yeah. Another thing is that, like, one of the thing is that when a caliph or ruler, he has an obligation to impose these laws, right? I mean, as a Muslim, he does have an obligation. So it doesn't really make sense to say that these laws are no longer useful or relevant.
But yeah,
So
what I was saying is that for certain things, like if you're going to advance a new argument, then you have to have qualifications to do that. You
yeah,
are disagreeing with the giants of Islam. So what makes you qualified to have your own opinion about that? So we can criticize him for that. If I were doing that, if I were doing the same thing, criticize me too equally. But I don't do that.
yeah. So actually, Astullah at one point I think says that you're saying that Dr. Jonathan Brown is saying that that he's saying that these are fiction or Sharia hudud punishment are fiction or mythical or something to that like. Uh, so, what do you have to say to that?
The report is very clear on quoting Jonathan Brown and what he's saying. Like, we can go and look at it.
By the way, I did give the link of invitation to Brother Asadullah. If you're watching, please feel free to join us, and we can discuss together, inshallah.
So the actual implementation of the hudud comes at this discretion of the ruler and is
Yeah,
not necessary for people to be Muslim. So I asked this question here: does that mean that the ruler has the right to implement or suspend the application of hudud at his personal discretion? Like, what does Jonathan Brown mean by this? If he means that it's just the ruler decides, oh, I don't want to apply the hudud now, that's
he
false.
can't. I mean, it's an obligation.
It's an obligation for the
Yeah,
hudud. Yeah, there are certain aspects of the Sharia that is up to his discretion. But the
yeah,
hudud, he can't suspend it and say that I won't apply that. Okay?
yeah, and especially since it has always been applied. Like, I mean, if he makes the argument that times have changed, but times were different at the time of Abu Bakr, right? There was an open rebellion, the Ridda wars that didn't exist, at the time of the Prophet, or I mean, it exists, but not to that level. Then Ali Radhan who dealt with the Kharijis, like always different issues, but they never like abandoned these rulings or these punishments.
Exactly. I mean, the thing is that we have to look at what the fiqh say. Fiqh says, what do the madhahib say? The schools of thought. What have the scholars of history have said about this? Because you might be able to find examples of situations in the history of the Khulafa, for example, where they're in a time of war or they're in a time of a very severe situation, life and death, and
Yeah,
they suspended this or they suspended that. You can
yeah,
find examples, but this is not for us to just cherry pick. We have to look at what the scholars of Islam throughout history, 1400 years, have said about the application of hudud. And they don't say that it's the ruler's personal discretion to suspend them whenever they want. And so that's what we go by. For yaqeen to publish this, it means that they're contradicting the consensus of the schools of thought and of fiqh.
yeah.
So then this is what he says. He says, how do Muslims make sense of hudud's absence? Can we justify it, or taking things one step further, can we justify not calling for their return? So he's saying that maybe we don't want hudud in the future, even if there's a khalifa. Maybe we can justify him not implementing the had. But as we have seen, the hudud were really not much more than symbols of submission to the idea of God's law. They're just symbolic. So, I mean, I bring, in this section of the report, I bring quotes, and our team is bringing these quotes from his other lectures. So we do this kind of not exhaustive, but we're looking at a lot of his statements and lectures about what he means by this. Hudud are symbolic. They're not meant to be implemented. Maybe you can justify not calling for their return. This causes so much confusion, and it's an attack on the Islamic tradition. Yeah.
Now,
I mean, people can go just read what the article says, what our report, Muslim Skeptic, says. Go back to the Yaqeen article and read it for yourself and see if we're misrepresenting anything. That is, of course, if they haven't changed the article, because I haven't gone back and checked to make sure And we want to do that. We want to update this article. The last time this report was updated was August 30th. So we
Yeah.
updated it for certain parts, added, we made additions basically. I think this section we added about yaqeen and Google manipulating search results. So this is very interesting for you to go read. But yeah, we want to be accurate. We want to be honest. We're not trying to make false statements about anyone, and definitely not yaqeen.
Yeah. So if I could share the Word file, is okay. Okay. So I want to continue showing some other things that Brother Asadullah said, and then maybe we'll finish this. One of the things I wanted to show you. Okay, so what are your thoughts overall on the Dr. Moat paper?
I haven't read it in a long time. So, but like I said, you mean his liberalism paper?
Yeah, liberalism paper.
Yeah, I remember again, he's like trying to promote this Islamic liberalism idea
Yeah,
that,
yeah, Islamic liberalism.
so it was kind of a ridiculous paper.
Yeah, so basically he says, and you can see, so basically he says, so basically he uses the incident of like the angels bound down to Adam as a premise to justify that humanity should be revered or something like that, which is a very strange opinion because I've never heard this, right? I mean, just because we're prostrating towards something doesn't mean that that uh, thing itself has value, right? We prostrate because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to, right? So he makes the argument that we should revere humanity because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the angels to revere Adam. So I don't know which is it an Islamic principle to like revere human beings because the angels were told to bow down to Adam.
Um, but there is this idea in Islam that that human beings have value and that Allah has honored human beings and humanity.
Yeah, of
And
course.
sign of, so there is value in human beings,
Yeah, yeah,
even when they're not Muslim, even non-Muslims. And this goes back to like for certain rules in fiqh as well. Like you're not supposed to hit people in the face in Islam. You don't hit people in the face. Why is this?
yeah,
Um, this is a command of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it's based that this nobility or honor that Allah has put in every human being and Adam as well. So there, I would actually agree with Moat on that. That there is value in human beings in Islam. Islam does recognize that.
yeah. But it seems like he kind of takes that premise and kind of goes further with it. Oh, sorry.
No, yeah, of
So,
course,
for
absolutely.
example,
I agree
uh,
with you. He takes it to this direction of complete liberalism. That's the problem.
okay, so and here's a quote. I have this. So as you can see, he says specifically, if the angels are commanded to express reverence to Adam, then what are the implications for us? Is Adam not even more? Oh, so no, actually, this is yeah. So basically, he makes this argument based on this. Okay, so actually, I have this that I wanted to share with you. So Asdullah writes in his paper, according to Daniel, serving others is only a means to an end and not an act of worship itself. Contrary to the Quran and Sunnah, he seems to view being a Khalifa of creation is as fundamental distinct from the very goal he desires to achieve, which is worship of Allah. Ironically, this conveys the very distinctly humanist doctrine he accuses Yaqeen Institute of harboring. So basically, what he seems to be saying is that you're saying that serving others is only a means to an end. Are you saying that?
I don't know what that even means.
So basically, it seems like he says that.
I don't. I never say that if you're serving humanity, that means you're not serving Allah. I never said that. This report never says that.
Yeah, and I even pointed this out, which is that, of course, I mean, you said that, of course, one aspect of worshiping Allah is serving others. So you clear cut said this.
Yeah.
See, it's almost like he didn't either read it or missed it somehow. I don't know.
And that's
It
in the
seems kind of
same
weird.
paragraph as he was criticizing earlier. That's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
same paragraph when we're talking about Nazar Khan.
yeah,
I shared it on the screen too.
yeah. I mean, you clearly said this. Uh, so I think
Yeah, the
again
point is
here.
about emphasis. Like, what is Yaqeen Institute emphasizing in not one quote, not two quotes, in many, many articles? They are emphasizing this humanist interpretation of Islam, this liberal humanist interpretation of Islam,
Yeah,
human rights regime interpretation of Islam. They're not denying that worship is important. And I'm not claiming that they're denying that worship is important. The Muslim Skeptic report, is not denying that Yaqeen people consider worship of Allah important. The point of the report, the point that I'm making here, is that they're emphasizing something aspects of Islam to make it seem like Islam is compatible with liberalism, to
yeah,
make it seem like Islam is a liberal secular religion. That's the problem, as it is causing confusion and it's a misguidance. It's pushing Muslims further into these liberal deviancies.
yeah. I think what they do is kind of like this. I think it's a logical fallacy. It's called fallacy of composition, if I'm not mistaken, which is that they're taking a part of the religion and comparing that with secular humanism and all these other things, while ignoring the bigger kind of aspects of it. Uh, it's kind of something that can summarize as. So, so let me show you some other quotes that Daniel kind of, sorry, Astullah, brother Astullah, kind of, hold on, no, sorry, wrong. Where did it go? Oh, here we go. Okay. So, okay, so this is what he wrote. Uh, That said, Daniel may attempt to respond by stating that when he accused Yakin Institute of propagating humanism, he was simply referring to some benign theologically grounded variant and not secular humanism per se, the most commonly held understanding of the concept. However, this would be clearly false because in section 5 of his article, he clearly singles out Yakin for slavishly catering to secular humanism. So, does slavishly catering to humanism means you're accusing them of, uh, you know, this secular humanism?
Yeah, I am accusing them. The report is accusing them.
Okay. So,
They're catering, of course, they're catering to. When you have an article that says that Muslims should advocate and endorse many LGBT rights, is that catering to LGBT community?
yeah, I think the point here is that you did say that, they're catering to, not necessarily promoting the exact secular humanism that the Western hegemony has, right? They're promoting their own version of it. And you even pointed this out in your paper. So,
So if Yaqeen doesn't promote 100% secular humanist UN documents and put it on their website, that means they're not promoting secular humanism?
yeah, I mean, that's what it implied here.
I mean, it's more dangerous, right? You have deviant Muslims online. They have websites, they have YouTube channels. they will explicitly say that Muslims should be humanist, Muslims should accept all of these liberal doctrines, and they should reform their religion to match pro-LGBT, pro-feminist, pro-liberal Western ideology. They'll say that explicitly. Those people are not popular with the Muslim community. Those people are not going to have
Yeah.
an influence on the Muslim community. But the people who are more sophisticated in their projection or their pushing of secularism and humanism on the Muslim community will wrap it up in Islam. They will dress it up and they'll make it look like, no, we're promoting Islam. We're promoting authentic Islam, and whoever disagrees with us is because they're extremists. They're jihadist extremists who don't understand, or they don't have qualifications, or they don't understand our context, or blah, blah, blah. All these excuses that Yaqeen brings out.
Yeah.
That's much more dangerous. That is going to lead to much more confusion. That's
Yeah.
why it's so important, because they're mixing. They're mixing things that are true with things that are very false and very detrimental to Iman, to the Iman of the Muslim community. That's why it's so important to call it out.
Uh, so actually, let me tell you about a funny law that we have in Bangladesh. So recently, this happened quite a year back. We have a law that passed that no one can marry, no girls can be married until they're 18. Until they're 18. So anyone who marries before that is considered completely illegal. So you're a crime. If you like follow the Prophet's advice that we should marry early, you're a criminal. And so this does have devastating effect if you like don't keep this in check.
Aren't there like certain imams in Bangladesh that will defend that law and will say, actually, yeah, this is perfectly in line with
Yeah,
the.
absolutely.
So that's what yaqeen is in the West.
I mean, the thing is that we have kind of like Islamist and Islamic movement, but oftentimes what happens is that because the secular government doesn't like them, they oftentimes bring various different charges against them. They get jailed, locked up. Like you probably heard of like the Modi protest, right?
Yeah.
Protest that happened against Modi. So again, in that protest, bunch of people were shot, like literally killed. Like no one talked about it. But in the Indian media, they showed it as if like these jihadists are trying to. They hate Modi. Why do they hate? Why do they hate Modi? Modi is such a lovely person. What do not? So this is just complete hypocrisy. And I've noticed that in your website you did you guys do focus on Hinduism a lot. I want to thank you guys for this because a lot of people don't focus on this, and this is a huge issue, especially if you live in this region. Uh, so thank you guys for that. Jazakallah. I hope that you guys put more focus on that because Hinduism is something that we should focus on, or at least the Hindu Bhakt ideology.
Yeah, inshallah, we are really focusing on it. We're bringing on more people to write about it and to make videos on Hinduism and also just Hindutva.
Yeah,
Stay tuned for that.
inshallah. Okay, so let's finish this up. I have a few more quotes that we. Okay, so um, uh,
Should I apologize? What is that? I should apologize to who?
huh?
I should apologize for Dr. Khan for misrepresenting him. Where do we misrepresent him?
Oh yeah, no. This is what basically Asadullah was implying that you misrepresented him or something in his accusation regarding takfir. If
Yeah.
you can show me on your paper, maybe you can go through it.
Okay, sure.
I don't remember exactly, so it's regarding takfir.
Yeah, so this is Moat. This is separate, using the term takfiri extremists. Like this term takfiri extremist. This is coming from Western intelligence agencies. Basically, it's part of the like the term takfiri has been made into this political term that takfiri means you're going to commit atrocities and terrorism against civilians, and you're basically ISIS if you do takfir. So Moat uses that term. But then let's see, what does this report say? Okay, so this is another one of the extremist beliefs, quote unquote extremist beliefs, Nazar Khan attributes to ISIS and other terror groups is takfir, pronouncing someone to be kafir. In his essay, Forever on Trial, Islam and the Charge of Violence, Khan writes, a central dogma of violent movements is the excommunication of any Muslim who disagrees with their principles. In Arabic, this is called takfir, the practice of pronouncing someone to be a kafir, i.e. disbeliever. The Quran prohibits this attitude of self-righteousness. Okay, then
by the way, can we see Brother Asadullah's response to this? Because I didn't actually take a note. I think I wanted to, but I missed it somehow. Hold on, let me just share this. Let me share the screen. Let me pull up Brother Asadullah's.
Yeah, the thing is that takfir, yeah, it can be misused by extremists. But that doesn't mean takfir itself is an invalid thing in Islam.
Yeah.
So for him to say that the Quran prohibits this attitude of self-righteousness, and he's associating that with takfir, like, this is nonsense.
Oh, by the way, I wanted to ask you, he actually calls you Don Quico de la Umma. What does that mean? I don't know. Is he saying you're Don Quixote from the book?
Yeah, from the book Don Quixote.
Oh, Don Quixote, yeah. Okay, so let's see. I think it's triggered. Okay, takfir. Where'd it go? It's a very lengthy article. The wrong one. Hold on. Okay, here we go. In section 8 of his article, Daniel responds to another excerpt from Dr. Khan, who attempts to explain one of the central dogmas of groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Here he accuses Dr. Khan of conflating normative Islamic praxis with extremism. So this and here he quotes what you just cited. However, this is a straw man fallacy, which he says, which is to attribute an easily refuted position to your opponent, one that the opponent wouldn't endorse, and then proceed to attack the easily refuted position, the straw man, believing you have thereby undermined the opponent's actual position. Nowhere does Dr. Khan conflate the idea of extremists with Islam. Quite the contrary. The first clue is within the very excerpt Daniel quotes, which clearly state that the form of takfir utilized by the extremists is the excommunication of any Muslim who disagrees with their principle. Although subtle in its emphasis, Dr. Khan clearly mentions the principle of extremists, not of Islam per se. He outlined these principles earlier in the same paper. So basically, what he's saying is that Dr. Khan is not saying that in Islam there's no takfir, but when these radical Muslims, extremists, when they use it, it's bad. So, but I don't really get that from when I read his article.
He defines takfir right before his statement where he says that the Quran prohibits this. He says in Arabic this is called takfir. So did he just misdefine takfir? Because takfir is not just extremists. So his definition, he says a central dogma of violent movements is the excommunication of any Muslim who disagrees with their principles. In Arabic, this is called takfir.
Okay.
So is that if he means only violent movements do takfir, that's false. Because many scholars, past and present, legitimate Muslim scholars, not violent extremist movements, do takfir.
Yeah.
So it's either he's mistaken in only attributing it to violent movements, or he's saying that this is just takfir in general is something that the Quran prohibits. That's what the quote directly says.
Yeah, and even if we were to grant that premise for the sake of argument, it's still kind of fallacious because it's very, very ambiguous to define kind of like the Islamic terms like this. I mean, you have to make it very, very clear. Like, if you're kind of like being vague, kind of, it's not. It seems very. Uh,
He defined it correctly. He said in Arabic, takfir is the practice of pronouncing someone to be a kafir. That is what takfir is. That's the correct definition. But then the very next sentence, he says the Quran prohibits this.
yeah,
So what Asadullah is saying is that no. Nazar Khan is saying that the Quran prohibits the violent movement doing takfir.
yeah.
How does that make sense given the passage, like given the structure, the sentence structure?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he acknowledges it.
He's
That's
very,
what Allah says. Like he says, "Oh, it's subtle, but you really have to understand. Like it's so subtle."
you can see it, like
Yeah.
John Cena.
So these are the kinds of, like you said, that Asadullah. It's like a long report. His report is filled with this junk. Like it's all trash like this.
Yeah,
Like the biggest problem that his report has, or the biggest distortion that he accuses Muslim skeptic, or he accuses me of, is the Jalajil thing that we already covered. That's his
yeah,
biggest problem, and as you saw, that's complete nonsense.
yeah. So, by the way, let's just finish up. I think my battery is running out of power.
Yeah. Okay.
Hold on. I'm gonna shoot the stuff.
Is it just me? Am I live still? I think you fell off.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that. My camera died.
Oh, okay, no
I don't
problem.
have a camera actually. I just record on my phone.
Oh, okay.
So
So your voice is coming through your phone still, or not?
no, it's a separate mic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to say this. I'm actually a big admirer of your work. So, in the beginning, we kind of got off on the wrong foot. So I do apologize for that. It was a little bit
Yeah,
hostile.
no hard feelings. I don't think that you were saying anything intentionally, but it's just very sensitive,
Yeah,
And
I
I
understand.
want to emphasize, like, it's so sensitive that I'm going to emphasize again that I do not agree. I'm going to look directly into the camera. I do not agree with the killing of civilians, and I do not agree with terrorist movements. I completely denounce them. So just so that the record is very clear, because I know that you didn't mean to do it, and you weren't accusing me of supporting that, but just
Of
for
course.
clarity, it's such a sensitive issue
Yeah,
that it can cause a lot of legal problems, and
yeah,
I don't want Yaqeen's friends in the Department of Homeland Security and the U.S. government to start knocking on my door.
yeah. I understand. I do apologize for that. I think what happened in the stream was that someone kind of brought up this argument, and I was kind of arguing with him back and forth, and it got kind of heated. So I might have lost track of what I was saying.
Yeah,
Uh, so so let me share some of the last things I want to share with you. Uh, oh, actually, I think we're done. That was pretty much all I wanted to cover. But there's more. I only covered like from beginning to 2.2 of his. So basically, one third of his article. But let's talk about some other things that he touches on in his article. So he actually accuses you of following a gay philosopher, if I'm not mistaken. What's that about?
no clue.
So
I
he
don't know
said
what you're
that.
talking about.
Okay, I think I have it here. Can I let me just share the screen? Uh, let's see. Chrome tab. Okay. Okay. So I don't know where it is. Let me just. I think it's somewhere in the. Okay, here. Michael Foucault, feminism. So can you explain what this is? Daniel's affinity to postmodern philosophy. uh, Anti-liberalism has become the lens by which Daniel interprets Islamic concept and the means by which he understands the view of other Muslim thinkers and scholars. As such, his criticism often extends to misinterpreting other statements as liberalism, where in fact no such relationship exists. This is exemplified in his understanding of coercion. According to Daniel, moral value isn't recognized by Allah through freedom of to act, but by force. This sentiment contradicts the Quran and Sunnah. So, are you saying that, uh, that according to Daniel, as he says, moral value isn't recognized by Allah through freedom to act, the freedom to intend, but by force? Is that what you're saying?
What does that even mean? Moral value. So we have to go to what exactly he's talking about. And I didn't know this. He's like quoting a Slack channel. So he's quoting my private messages. That's
Yeah.
really, really out of bounds. Like, this is a Slack channel. That was a private message to someone. I mean, there's nothing problematic in it, but the fact that he's quoting my private messages, how is he was, subhanAllah, like, this is really inappropriate that he takes private messages. Should I start revealing some of the messages that Yaqeen has sent me? Should I start publishing those things, Asadullah? You published a Slack message that was private, and you're putting it publicly on your website. Do you want me to start publishing things that Yaqeen has sent me privately? Because I haven't done that, but I'll start doing it. If you leave this up, I'm going to start publishing Yaqeen material that they sent me privately. I don't do that. I keep private things privately. This is called amana. I keep the amana that I have with people that I correspond with. But if you're going to break that amana as an affiliate of Yaqeen Institute, then I'm going to start publishing the emails and the messages of Yaqeen Institute so people can see exactly what Yaqeen Institute is about. How about I do that? So let's go to what he's saying. This
Yeah.
is
So he,
referring to
he
Moat's paper again, right?
Yeah, so he then says this sentiment contradicts the Quran and Sunnah and also happen to be strikingly similar to the ideas of postmodernist philosophers like Michael Foucault, who believed
Foucault,
history
yeah.
could
Michel Foucault is a French
Michel Foucault, sorry,
philosopher.
yeah, mispronouncing it. So, who believed history could not be explained by the intention or aims of individuals, but rather by institutions of power and control. Unsurprisingly, Daniel has used Foucault to justify this position in the past. This is evidenced by his Slack conversation with me and other Yakins, other fellows at
Private
Yakin.
discussion.
Huh?
At the private discussion.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So, with me and other fellows at Yakin Institute, where he attempted to argue this very point above using the exact same analogy while explicitly referencing Foucault as justification for his view. So, let me ask you: are you taking this view from this gay philosopher, as he says it, that when you're arguing for Sharia or hudud punishment, or like other these type of things? Then he then goes on to kind of like explain Foucault's
Yeah, so
Foucault.
discipline, yeah, social influence is a form of coercion. That's absolutely true. Like, how can anyone deny that? Just because Michel Foucault happens to acknowledge something that's real, that means it's not true? Or we can't like acknowledge that, or we can't refer to that? If I have a program, a social program that says you cannot build masajid, you cannot build mosques, that, or I have a social program in Bangladesh that says you have to be 18 years old to get married. That's a social policy. Is that not coercion? Is that not forcing people to behave in a certain way? That's force. The Sharia also has social policies, and they're coercive because if you don't abide by certain policies, it's a crime. And
Yeah,
police will come and force you to abide by it, or they'll put you in jail, or they could even execute you. That's coercion.
yeah.
Asadullah doesn't understand these things. Like, again, maybe he needs to go back to school and read a book or two. But that's something that doesn't contradict Islam. And just because one gay philosopher has also made this kind of statement, and I cited that to educate people like Asadullah, to educate people at Yaqeen, these other Yaqeen fellows in this private conversation, that means I'm endorsing a gay philosopher. Like, this is retarded. This is so stupid.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, I've seen some of Brother Asadullah's live stream, and there's nothing against him, but he himself promoted certain atheist philosopher. He promoted their books. For example, he constantly talked about Thomas Kuhn, for example. He said how he shaped his view,
I promote Thomas Kuhn.
pragmatism. Yeah, yeah. So I don't think that there is necessarily anything wrong with like taking knowledge per se.
Look,
So
if you don't want to like take from anything except from Muslim sources, then you're not going to read any books. You can't go to college. You can't go to school. You can't be on the internet. You can't be on social media
yeah,
because that's taking from all of these different kinds of non-Muslims. You can't refer to anything in pop culture. You can't refer to
yeah,
anything in any kind of academic work because a lot of it is being produced by non-Muslims. The important thing is to be grounded in Islam
yeah,
and to advocate Islam and teach Islam in a way that is truthful and comports with the Islamic tradition.
yeah,
That's so when I say to like I refer to an academic work in some of my debates, like my debate with the snail guy. I'm referring to a
snail
lot
guy.
of
You're just gonna refer to him as the snail guy.
yeah, I'm referring to a lot of academic research by non-Muslims, but that research is pointing to something that is real, that in Islam is acknowledging reality. So if there's an academic paper that says that marriage is collapsing throughout the world, people are not getting married, it's that research is done by a non-Muslim, but you can still refer to it. You can still see, as long as it's accurate and
Yeah,
it's not conflicting with Islam, you
yeah,
can refer to that, no problem. And this is
yeah,
actually the practice of the scholars throughout Islam and even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba. I'll give you an example. This is for a video I'm actually doing on red pill. So there's all this controversy on red
yeah,
pill.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of
So I'm making a
you,
video about that right now. After I'm done recording with you, I'm going to record it, inshallah. But
okay.
this example is of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba, and all Muslim scholars who discuss language, Arabic language,
Yeah,
lugha, uh,
yeah,
Arabic grammar. They refer to Jahili poetry,
yeah,
poetry from Jahiliyyah, the Mu'allaqat.
yeah,
So that poetry is studied. It's written by mushrikeen. It's written by those. That poetry is written by kuffar, non-Muslims, but it's still referred to for the benefit of Arabic language, for the benefit of nahu, sarf, balagha, especially shi'r, poetry. This is something
yeah,
that's studied by these traditional scholars, and it's even referred to in certain hadith. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam alludes to or references mu'allaqat and their authors.
yeah.
So there's
So
no
actually,
problem with that. So this
yeah.
is something that is so like brain dead for Asadullah to like say I'm promoting a gay philosophy.
So someone actually asked, although not relevant, I wanted to ask you this. So Mr. Power, he asks, ask Daniel, what's his view on Muhammad Hijab's argument view on relocating apostates instead of death punishment? So
His
what are your
argument has nothing to do. Muhammad Hijab's argument has nothing to do with the Islamic tradition and what the scholars have said on this issue of Ridda. He is just bringing his own interpretation, maybe from Akram Nadwi, which he has referred to before. So it's not a good argument. And it's, just like these other arguments from Yaqeen. And it's very easy to deal with the issue of Ridda and apostasy. I've spoken about it. I've written about it.
yeah,
There's no reason to compromise the Islamic tradition and what all the scholars of Islam have said,
yeah,
just because you want to appease this religious freedom ideology.
yeah? I think the biggest kind of like the problem with this is that almost all generations or Islamic caliphate have practiced this law. So the argument that now we have all of a sudden now we're in such a peril we cannot practice this. I mean, in Saudi Arabia you still have this law, so I don't understand what the problem here is exactly.
Yeah,
So
they just have to invent something new to appease liberal secularism. That's all it is.
yeah, uh,
And people have asked me about hijab's view on this before, and I responded to them. It was on Twitter.
yeah. So his paper is very long. Like I haven't fully gone into it, but there are
Yeah,
some
as you
certain
saw, like
things.
I haven't fully read everything either. Like it's because it's so annoying, and his arguments are just completely like bad faith nonsense. And like I was surprised, I didn't know that he's publishing my private messages in this
Yeah, I think.
report. Like he probably doesn't even know the concept of amana and like not disclosing like your private conversations.
Uh, so I think here he kinds of says that pointed out something about Mubin. I don't know who that is. He's someone who apparently criticized Dr. Brown.
Yep.
Uh, so, so what exactly did he say? Was there like a argument between them? I'm not really familiar with this.
So I don't know what Asadullah is saying, but the article is what I referred to, where Jonathan Brown is talking about perspectives on salvation outside of Islam. So non-Muslims being in Jannah, basically.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah. So like I said, he in his paper said that a mushrik who had been Islam has reached that mushrik. He knows about Islam. He knows about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and
yeah,
he rejects that. He can still be forgiven by Allah. So that was part of the paper. And then Mubin, I
yeah,
cite Mubin in this report. Mubin says this is completely invalid. This is wrong, and it should be removed. And then after some months, Yaqeen quietly deletes like that offending paragraph, basically, without making any note about it or issuing a correction. That's like academically dishonest, because if you make a mistake
yeah,
in a research paper and you've published it and you've spread it and distributed it,
yeah, yeah,
if you make a huge correction like that,
yeah,
then
yeah,
you can make the note like we
yeah,
deleted
yeah,
this sentence,
yeah.
but they don't do that.
This this is interesting. You mentioned that I actually remembered something. So when it comes to I believe Dr. Moat's paper, uh, one of the things that Brother Astullah, what he does is that he brings new arguments that was not in Dr. Moat's original paper. So, which I find problematic because it's like shifting the goalpost, right? Or what is
Yeah,
it called? So basically, you refute them, and then they change the argument by adding new things. But
yeah,
that's not fair, right? That's like cheating.
yeah. Just like the first paper that we looked at, Justin Parrott's jihad paper, they say that, oh, we've updated it after. Okay, well, what were the updates? What did you
Yeah,
change? What did you delete?
yeah,
And you don't acknowledge the fact that, oh, the updates coincidentally only came after we published this huge refutation of it.
yeah, yeah, and
Like you changed the title of it. Like, why would you change the title? That means the original paper was so bad, and the title is no longer. You've changed it so much. You've changed the paper so much that the original title is no longer relevant. You have to change the whole title of the article. I mean, we only covered like a 3 or 4 papers,
yeah,
and we could have talked about many of their papers.
yeah. A lot of their papers have a lot more actually that you guys
And
didn't mention.
they're still publishing trash. Like this, we need to update our report because it's not reflective of all the garbage that Yaqeen has been publishing recently since we did our review.
Yeah, and the thing is, like they should at least mention like that they were like criticized. Like sometimes they mentioned vaguely that they were criticized, but they never like mentioned you guys or anything like that. Like, so, oh,
Fine. I don't care.
yeah,
I don't care for them to mention us or acknowledge us. I don't care about that. I care about them correcting the mistakes, acknowledging that they made mistakes. They need to acknowledge that because the community needs to know that they have been making major mistakes. So if they've
yeah,
been making major mistakes in the past, that means they're not a reliable source for understanding Islam or to learn about Islam. That means that what they present themselves as is this high level research institute that's producing the best research on Islam, and that they're the experts, they're the world experts, and they need to spread their articles all over the globe. But the record shows that they are making huge mistakes. They are distorting Islam in very significant ways, and they're usually unapologetic about it. And only if it's something is really egregious, maybe 4 years later or 3 years later, they'll quietly delete it. They'll quietly hide it. They have to
yeah,
hide it because if people are see all of these corrections that they've been making, it would discredit them. Why weren't these papers screened? Why don't you have legitimate Islamic authorities? Your yaqeen staff list includes Imam so and so, scholar so and so, sheikh so and so, doctor so and so. You have this long list of experts, supposedly,
yeah,
but they're not reading what you're publishing. They're not checking what you're publishing. That's why there's so many mistakes. That's why there's so many distortions. And
yeah,
you're publishing people who are not even experts. Like, what is Justin Parrott's expertise to be talking like this and explaining jihad? Like, he's a librarian, right? I don't know where he studied. I don't know like what gives him the authority to do ijtihad basically and put these novel views and to deny certain aspects of what scholars throughout history have said. What is the qualification of Jalajil to give his novel interpretation
yeah,
of evolution and human descent?
yeah. Someone asked me, "Hey, brother, Islamic calling, can you invite Asadullah Ali?" I did. I did invite him. I invited him. I gave him the link,
I've invited
but
him. I've invited him. I've invited Yaqeen. I've invited Omar Sulaiman. I've invited Jonathan Brown. I've invited all of these people to talk about it. They don't talk about it. They want to go on another stream. So I wouldn't be surprised if on this channel,
yeah,
Asadullah suddenly wants to talk to you,
yeah.
brother, and have a separate stream just with you, not with me, just with you. Right? Why is that? Why can't he talk to me face to face?
Yeah. So there goes that. So, and I think we should maybe conclude this. Like, these are like the kind of the points that I want to raise. So there's one thing I want to share though. So hold on, let me just. So Margarita Rosa. So
Oh God.
you. So you said that she apparently kind of like I don't know, like posts like weird pictures on
Yeah,
various different
go to her Instagram.
social media platforms, but she's apparently a revert to Islam. So I don't know, like, do you think it's don't you think like it's kind of unfair to like kind of criticize her like this?
So, like, set up the situation. Basically, Margarita Rosa, she's a revert, okay,
Yeah,
but it turns out she's a queer feminist, like openly queer, and her Instagram is very active. She puts all kinds of haram things of herself and others on her Instagram.
yeah,
So then, why is Yaqeen publishing her writing, her papers? So she had 3 papers with
really
Yaqeen.
three.
Yeah, three whole papers. They have a video like on with her. So is this the kind of person that you want to promote? I had 2 papers on Yaqeen. There were 2 papers when I was with Yaqeen as an employee, as their director of research. 2 of my papers were published on Yaqeen. They took those 2 papers down at some point a few years ago. They took my papers on evolution down.
Yeah.
And I asked them, why did you take my paper? I did a Facebook post on it. I
Yeah. Yeah.
asked their board, why did you take my papers down that you had published? And they said their answer was because you criticized us. So that's a reason. And this was way before the report that we published. This was way before I had uh, written anything to criticize.
Wait, isn't Yakin? Don't they claim that they, if they hold themselves to responsible when they're criticized? Like, this is one of the claims they make, right?
The what?
Like, they hold themselves, like they're not afraid of criticism. They're open to criticism. This is something I heard, like from
Yeah,
Asadullah.
how are they not afraid of criticism when I criticize them basically in one sentence, not even a whole article on Muslim Skeptic, for their article on abortion, which promotes Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is the most extreme feminist abortion organization in the U.S. Pro LGBT, pro gender fluidity, pro child gender transition. This is Planned Parenthood. I criticize yaqeen. Why in your abortion paper do you have this promotion? Like, you're praising Planned Parenthood. Why? That was it. That was all I had put in another article. And because of that, they took down my papers.
Yeah.
And this is record. You can go and look at my Facebook page. But you have a queer activist who's openly queer feminist, who her Instagram page is like completely haram. You can't even go to it because it's full of very haram images. But her articles are still up, her videos still up, and it's unfair to criticize that. What do you mean it's unfair to criticize that? What if there was a neo-Nazi, okay?
Yeah.
And someone they published, John Smith on Yaqeen Institute, and then later they found out, oh, John Smith is actually a neo-Nazi.
Yeah.
Would they delete his papers, or would it be unfair for someone to say, hey, you have a neo-Nazi on your site, maybe you should delete that?
Yeah,
Would that be
doesn't
unfair
doesn't
criticism?
Jonathan Brown kind of like says that again? I hope I'm not I'm misinterpreting him, but what he said was that like we should make alliances with the LGBTQ or something like that.
Okay. Why? Make an alliance for what? Why do we need to ally with
Like,
modern day Qawm Lut? Maybe Lut alayhi salam, the prophet Lut in the Quran, maybe he should have said, look guys, let's just have an alliance. Maybe that's what we should do. Is this Jonathan Brown's argument? He's such a brilliant mind, a mujtahid apparently. So much more qualified and knowledgeable than me.
yeah, I think what he said was that we should make alliance based on common shared goal or something. So,
Yeah, I know, a shared vision.
which is interesting
Most,
because I wonder if he would consider lining up with the alt right or kind of like the alt right Christians. I mean, we have a lot of similarities with them, right?
yeah, let's
So,
let's have some alliances. Let's like go to the marches, the neo-Nazi marches.
yeah.
Why not? That's an alliance, right? Yeah.
Okay, someone says we should have alliances with white supremacists, according to Daniel, but not
Oh,
with
really?
wokesters.
Really? Is that the claim? Where have I said let's have an alliance with white supremacists? See, these
Yeah,
people
it
are
says,
liars. Like, point out, where did I say we should have an alliance with white supremacists? You're just lying. So unless you can provide the quote where I say that sentence,
yeah. Yeah, brother Muslim apologist. By the way, he's another YouTuber. I think he's a fan of your works as well. He says, "Aki, can I join the stream? Maybe later, inshallah. I will. The three of us can do a stream together, maybe sometimes. Inshallah, in the future.
what does he want to talk about?
Uh, I assume he actually deals with Christian apologetics. So basically, people like David Wood, J. Smith, kind of their nonsense. So he's actually expert on it. He's been doing it for a while. He's like, I think even David Wood himself mentioned him. Like they used to be rival back in the day. So he has a lot of experience, alhamdulillah. So maybe we
Yeah,
can have a
be happy to
conversation.
talk to him, inshallah. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can talk to him. So let's get back to some of the other things.
Yeah,
So
maybe
this is
just like
something.
another point or so, then, because I
Yeah,
got.
yeah. Then finish up. Uh, Okay, so Arnold Yassin Mole, uh, in section 9 of his article, Daniel attempts to associate Yakin fellow Arnold Yassin Moin with the reform movement and Amina Wadud.
Yeah.
Uh, in an effort to associate Yakin with Amina Wadud, Daniel dug up some old tweets of Arnold Yassin Moll praising her. While it is true that he once considered himself a Quranist and found that approach compelling, at some point after converting to Islam, Arnold is no longer upon that methodology and has for a few years no, and for a few years no being a student of Mufti Ajmed Muhammad, his bio is explicit with regard to his traditional leanings. So, what do you have to say about this? Like,
So yeah, he has a past. Arnold Yassin Mole. He was part of this reform progressive movement
yeah, yeah,
with Amina Wadud and others. But his current research is along similar lines. And this is what our report cites. So if you can share my screen.
hold on. Yeah,
So he has this ridiculous paper of Aisha radiallahu anha being 18 years old when marrying the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But then he
yeah,
is slated to contribute these articles in 2020. So I guess they never published this, but this is according to his academia profile. It said
yeah,
like
yeah,
forthcoming Yaqeen Institute for Islamic Research. So
yeah,
Islam and the question of human rights, the classical foundation of Islamic human rights discourse, the fiqh of human rights treaties, modern CR and an Islamic commentary on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
yeah,
Mole's focus on human rights in Islam has a long history. He's been an active contributor to the reformist movement, blah, blah, blah. In the past, Mole has written about his admiration. So the point is this someone that needs to be writing for Yaqeen on Islamic human rights, where he hasn't made any retraction of his previous relationships? Yassin, like this is very significant. Maybe it's not significant for Yaqeen, but it's significant for Muslims that basic Muslims that you have a history with Quranists and you're attending conferences and you're best buddies with Amina Wadud.
yeah,
Like these are the leaders of the reform movement, and now you don't agree with all that stuff. Where's the retraction? Where have you clearly said that you're not about that anymore? Okay, like if you have a Muslim who is neo-Nazi, again
yeah,
using
yeah,
neo-Nazi example, and they have they're not only just a neo-Nazi, they're one of the leaders of the neo-Nazi movement,
yeah, yeah,
and then they start writing for Yaqeen or they start writing for your website. So, well, you have this history. Explain that. Says, oh, that was the past. I don't agree with that now. But you're a leader of that movement. You have to retract your involvement. You have to state clearly that this is no longer what I'm about. Rather, you haven't stated that, and you're still talking about these same kind of things like Islam and human rights.
yeah,
So, I mean, I'm not judging him for things that I haven't seen or that maybe he hasn't even finished writing yet. I think it's kind of interesting that he was slated to write 3 articles for Yaqeen in 2020, but there hasn't been anything that
yeah,
he's published. He did publish an article on misinformation, like COVID misinformation, I think, recently or
yeah,
last
yeah.
year, but nothing on none of these titles. So this, of course, I'm going to criticize that. Everyone should have this question mark about his involvement with Yaqeen.
Yeah. Um, so, I think, well, I guess we should probably conclude here. uh,
I mean, this is a basic principle of Islam,
yeah,
that knowledge is the deen. Like this is the deen of Islam that we're talking about. So you have to be very careful where you're taking your knowledge from.
yeah,
You have to be very careful where you're taking your knowledge from. So there are all these question marks. You have queer activists. You have leaders of the reform movement, past leaders of the progressive Muslim movement. You have CVE architects and people who have been working actively with counter radicalization. You have all of these associations. It is completely valid for Muslims to question that and to be suspicious of that. We're talking about Islam here. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can't just wave it off and say, "Oh, you're just, this is the fallacy of blah 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 blah." Like, no, it's not a fallacy. This is a legitimate question that we have about your institute. But they're not willing to address any of these. They just want to silence their opposition or
Yeah,
write
and
ridiculous reports about Don Quixote.
I kind of found it funny. Yeah, because it's Don Quixote. So, brother, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really a small YouTuber, so I do look up to you a great deal, and it meant a lot that you joined me. Inshallah, maybe you can do more collaboration in the future, inshallah, because I imagine a lot of people will come attack me now because I've already been attacked before. So, who knows?
Why you were attacked for what?
Saying things like I'm incompetent, etc., etc. I have certain problems with. Maybe I'll explain it later. But yeah, it was really nice having you. I think you are a very fresh and important voice in the Muslim Ummah, Alhamdulillah. And may Allah again blessings to your work, inshallah.
Yeah, so
And
if I
and
can just say
keep trashing Hindu Bhakts. We need more of that.
inshallah.
So
Yeah, if I can just say one thing though, is that
yeah,
thank you for inviting me. I appreciate you actually reading and doing an analysis. That's very good. I think that I benefited a lot in studying Islam over the years and decades. I really benefited from people who were more knowledgeable for whatever reason, helping me and talking to me, even like arguing, like because we had a back and forth, like that really helps, and I benefited from that. So I like to, help people who are trying to learn and they're trying to grow and they're trying to expand their understanding of Islam and gain more knowledge. So I was very happy and willing to join you on this stream.
yeah, thank you. By the way, you can find brother Daniel on his YouTube channel, and also he has a website, the Muslim Skeptic. You can go check it out. He also has an institution, Al Institution, I believe, where he's doing some important work. Alhamdulillah. And yeah, thank you for joining me. Inshallah, we'll do more streams because I'm not done with Asadullah's paper. There's more, more, maybe hopefully. And this is a message to Brother Asadullah that look, like we're all Muslims here, and we wanna have some kind of reconciliation. We can just keep fighting each other. So if you have certain grievances with Brother Daniel, please do come to the stream and talk to us, because otherwise we can solve anything. And that's my nasiha to Brother Astullah. Please do come to the stream, talk to Brother Daniel, talk to me, you know, criticize us, no problem. But at least, talk to us, have a conversation. And yeah, with this on end, thank you, Brother Daniel, for joining me.
Well, why limit yourself to Asadullah? Invite Omar Suleiman. Why can't Omar Suleiman come on your
Yeah,
stream?
yeah, of course.
He'd be good
Everyone,
for it.
everyone at
Invite
Yaqeen.
Jonathan Brown. Why can't he come? Nazar Khan.
Yeah, yeah,
Invite
of
them to
course.
the stream. Are they too good for your stream?
Of course, everyone is welcome. If they are willing to talk to us, you're all welcome. Just don't go behind our back and then just talk about it. Like that's not cool. You know, that seems a little shady. So I
Well,
hope
there's,
you guys.
there's talking behind someone's back, and then there's also misrepresenting someone
Yeah, yeah,
and lying about someone. That's even worse. That's namima.
yeah. So yeah, I guess we'll end the stream. Thank you guys. Thank you, bro, for joining me. And yeah, jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.